Chapter 121. Uchiha Sasuke can be said to be blessed by the heavens. He should be glad that he has such a meticulous brother like Uchiha Itachi. Everything that Uchiha Sasuke has was obtained by stepping on Uchiha Itachi's corpse. Without Uchiha Itachi, he might have become blind. Naturally, Uchiha Sasuke also inherited everything from Itachi, whether in Jinjutsu or other aspects. It's my turn to fight back. Dustless's eyes suddenly condensed cold light, and his pupils enlarged. Ordinary ninjutsu is useless against Rinnegan. Ordinary S-class ninjutsu like Amaterasu is almost useless in front of Rinnegan, and it can be easily absorbed by Rinnegan. If you want to use it, you have to use the unexpected. Tenseigan Chakra Mode. Dustless's body suddenly swept up the green chakra coat, and Dustless's body was wrapped tightly, and many green prayer beads floated behind him. The feeling he gave off was like the difference between heaven and earth. This is Linger transformed into Uchiha Sasuke and looked at Dustless, who was wrapped in green chakra. Naturally, he has never seen the legendary Tenseigan, especially the green eyes floating behind Dustless, which made him feel quite familiar. Those strange beads floating around seem similar to the truth-seeking ball. Although Uchiha Sasuke is arrogant and unruly, he is also a careful and calm person. Under the 6 Tomo Rinnegan state, he naturally knows that the green prayer beads are the power of yin and yang. In other words, it's actually another form of the power of 6 paths. This eye is called Tenseigan, and it's the eye of the descendant of Otsutsuki Himura, the younger brother of Rikudo Sannin. The conditions for the birth of this eye are also extremely harsh. Tenseigan is the same as Rinnegan. Pointing to the Tenseigan in his right eye, Dustless smiled slightly and deliberately explained it to his future third brother. Tenseigan? Hearing this, Uchiha Sasuke frowned slightly. He really didn't know what Tenseigan was, and he has never seen it, but Otsutsuki Himura is the younger brother of Rikudo Sannin, and his eyes are on the same level as Rinnegan. I'll show you now, after saying that. Dustless suddenly waved his hand, and the green prayer bead behind him suddenly gathered in front of him, forming a small disc that was faintly filled with a strong storm. Silver Wheel Reincarnation Explosion. Dustless shot out a giant whirlwind from his hand. The raging whirlwind absorbed everything in its path and devoured it to perfect itself, constantly expanding its size. When it got close to Uchiha Sasuke, it was a behemoth hundreds of meters long, and the area affected was almost several miles. What terrifying power! Uchiha Sasuke's eyes flashed with surprise as he stared at the 100-meter-long bijou. He felt the power of the bijou and the hurricane that wanted to tear him into pieces. His surprise quickly turned into a dignified and resolute expression. The evil chakra's body instantly soared several dozen feet into the air. The huge body covered the sky. The purple giant's head reached the sky, and its feet stepped on the ground. It was mighty and unyielding, with wings on its back, holding 2 long swords in its hands, and wearing the terrible Tengu armor. It was extremely visually shocking. It was Uchiha Sasuke's ultimate body, Kansusuno. Bang, bang, bang. Kansusuno's feet moved, and the ground suddenly began to shake, interpreting the power and destruction to the limit. Every time Kansusuno took a step, the ground trembled with it. Even the air showed an unprecedented state of restraint due to the decadent and ancient temperament of Kansusuno. The sky was so small, and the earth was so unbearable. It's useless. With a disdainful smile, Uchiha Sasuke looked at the oncoming giant whirlwind, and his face was full of endless sarcasm, and immediately controlled the ultimate body, Kansusuno's huge body. The 2 ancient swords in his hands were raised high, and mercilessly roared down. Boom! The huge purple slash suddenly blasted out, erasing everything that came into contact with it along the way, and the ground was instantly pulled into a long and thick crack, and it went straight toward the whirlwind. Pucci! The sharp air wave directly scattered the 100-meter-long whirlwind, and the purple light easily penetrated it, and the air wave swept toward Dustless. The situation was rapidly deteriorating, and Dustless was going to die here. I underestimated you, kid. Murderous aura surged between his eyebrows. Wu Chen's eyes shot out a monstrous killing intent. His body turned into thousands of rays of light, illuminating everything in the world. He used the glint fruit to directly ignore the attack of Uchiha Sasuke's ultimate body, Kinsusanoo. What a tricky ability. Seeing that Dustless easily ignored Kinsusanoo's attack, Uchiha Sasuke raised his eyebrows slightly, and then looked at Dustless, who turned into a rainbow light and swept straight toward the sky. Uchiha Sasuke, who was in the ultimate body, Kinsusanoo, was extremely calm, holding his hands in front of him, calm and collected. There was a sense of loneliness at the top. As expected of a master of disguise, I really can't compare with him. Dustless in the sky naturally saw the change in Uchiha Sasuke's demeanor, and the corners of his mouth also raised uncontrollably with a playful smile, thinking that Uchiha Sasuke deserved to be the second protagonist. Dustless can only look up to this fearless spirit. Idiot, you think the ultimate body Kinsusanoo is invincible. Ridiculous. Looking contemptuously at Kinsusanoo's extraordinary body, Dustless shook his head helplessly. The ultimate body Kinsusanoo can scare ordinary people, such as the late-stage 5 Kage, but for Dustless, it's just a giant target. In other words, Uchiha Sasuke is an absolute target in a giant coffin. Chakra burst out his body, and a huge aura of life overflowed from his body. Dustless crossed his arms, and the palms of his hands shone with a dazzling golden light, covering a vast and infinite range. His pupils suddenly opened, and a murderous aura roared out. Senjutsu, Yasukani no Magatama. Chapter 122. Light bullets rained down from the sky, and scrupulously roaring in the sky. The dense number of light bullets couldn't be captured at all, like a rainstorm changing the entire sky. The sky was dyed in a gorgeous golden color. Looking up, one could only see the endless flashes pouring down. In this case, it's difficult to find a place to not be covered, let alone escape unscathed. Good. Dense number. Looking up at the sky, Ling transformed into Uchiha Sasuke, after being sluggish for a long time, smacked his lips and muttered in disbelief, secretly smacking his lips. Looking at the dense number of raindrops, Susanu's huge body has indeed become the most suitable target. But even so, Uchiha Sasuke couldn't withdraw Susanu. He could only rely on it to resist. Otherwise, the person who will be beaten into a sieve and be miserably dismembered may be himself. In such an environment, the ultimate body, Susanu, can only resist. Uchiha Sasuke was not a fool. He immediately blocked Susanu's arms in front of him, especially Susanu's forehead. After all, he was in this position. Bang, bang, bang. Susanu, bathed in the golden light bullets, became the target of devastation. The heavy armor on his body was constantly peeled off layer by layer, and his huge body was forcibly pushed back by the terrifying force. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Although Susanu withstood a lot of light bullets, because the coverage of the light group was too large, it was inevitable that some would leak, and the ground became the target of slaughter. Looking around, there were countless holes in the ground, the size of a fist, like a bee's nest. There were holes everywhere, and they were connected to each other, showing how thoroughly destroyed it was. Damn it, hold on for me. Seeing Susanu's outer armor, even his skin and the meridians in his body were quickly peeled off layer by layer. Uchiha Sasuke's eyes flashed with unprecedented madness, and the evil purple chakra on his body rose again, constantly recasting and consolidating, repairing Susanu's body, trying to delay the destruction of the golden light. In this way, he would be safe and sound. This kid is pretty good. Susanu's damaged body was constantly repaired, resisting the erosion of the golden light. As time passed, the golden light bullets were no longer as dense as before, and the biting cold offensive gradually weakened. Until now, it completely stopped. Susanu's body was destroyed many times during this period, but Uchiha Sasuke used the terrifying chakra to restore it. What a monster. That kind of chakra consumption, I'm afraid I can't use it that many times. Suddenly recalling Kinsusanu's body that was constantly destroyed and repaired, Dustless was speechless. He was worthy of being the one who received the gift of the six paths, and also the reincarnation of Indra. He was far superior in all aspects. If this is your unique skill, I'm sorry to tell you. Then today you will die. In the restored Kinsusanu, Uchiha Sasuke coldly looked at Dustless, and a murderous intent in his eyes shot straight at Dustless like a blade. With your level, you talk big, but I'm afraid you don't have the teeth to do it. Are all the children of the concubines so arrogant nowadays? Turning a deaf ear to Uchiha Sasuke's words, Dustless looked at Uchiha Sasuke faintly, and then with a provocative face, he pointed his finger at him, signaling Uchiha Sasuke to come at him. Reckless thing, since you want to die so much, I'll help you. Seeing this, Uchiha Sasuke's face suddenly condensed into ice, and his murderous intent was revealed. Kinsusanu's body suddenly shook, and immediately, countless black runes poured into Kinsusanu's body, densely packed like ants, almost covering Kinsusanu's entire body. Glancing proudly at Dustless, Uchiha Sasuke suddenly shouted, and the cold tone made the temperature drop a lot, full of endless oppression. Senjutsu Kinsusanu. Ayo! 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 As if it was given life, a ferocious roar came out of Kinsusanu's mouth, and the roar spread like a shock wave, and the ripples could be clearly seen in the endless void. As expected, the system's ability is truly heaven-defying and terrifying, this damned sparring. Heavily exhaling a mouthful of turbid air, Wu Chen's eyes then heavily looked at Susanoo, which was covered with black veins all over its body, and the terrible thought in his heart was absolutely confirmed. As everyone knows, Uchiha Sasuke can't use the Senjutsu chakra at all, and the later Senjutsu, Kinsusu, is the Senjutsu Kekkei Genkai after absorbing Yugo's chakra. Uchiha Sasuke himself didn't have this ability, but now he can use this jutsu, which means that all the characters in the system have retained their greatest strength when they were alive. Even if it's not their unique moves, even if it's a combination of moves, now it can be used without limit. In other words, even if Uchiha Sasuke summons the Kyuubi that doesn't belong to him now, he can also use it on Kinsusu. Damn system. Dustless could only fiercely curse in his heart. This undoubtedly means that Uchiha Sasuke can now use six paths, Chibaku Tensei and Indra's Arrow alone. Whether it's a combination or not, as long as Uchiha Sasuke has used ninjutsu before, he can use it now. Bastard, what a blunder. Dustless's face was pale, and his whole body was cold. If it's really as he thought, maybe the one who will be crushed will be himself. I can only give it a try. The hesitation in his eyes was quickly replaced by madness. Dustless obviously intended to fight Uchiha Sasuke to the death, and his whole body was full of spirit. Chapter 123. Thinking quickly, Dustless's eyes flashed with a strange light. Thinking about it carefully, it's not like he has no chance of winning. Compared to Sasuke, who knows everything about his abilities, Kinsusanoo doesn't know anything about his abilities, so he can have an unexpected effect. Uchiha Sasuke, you will be the first person to see me use the Tensigen with all my strength. The green light that wrapped Dustless's whole body became stronger, even stronger than Otsutsuki Hagoromo on the moon. Pretentious, I'll tear off your clothes now. Linger transformed into Uchiha Sasuke and smiled contemptuously. Ultimate Susanoo suddenly flashed a purple bow, and at the same time, he pulled the bow with all his strength, and an extremely sharp arrow whizzed towards his face. Idiot! Raising his eyelids, his eyes were calm, indifferent and calm, without any emotional fluctuations, and the world in his pupils was like stagnant water without vitality. Looking up, he saw Dustless indifferently raising his tender and slender right arm, and the palm of his right hand emitted a brilliant golden light, and immediately slashed forward. Golden Wheel Reincarnation Explosion. The golden light in Dustless's palm stretched for hundreds of meters in an instant, and Kinsusanu's arrow was broken, and the straight light stretched without limit, sweeping toward Madara and Kinsusanu. Pucci. This epic scene was unforgettable. The golden ray of light swept across, and the moment it came into contact with the Senjutsu, it directly penetrated it, and the golden light passed through its body. Faintly, one could see that Kinsusanu's neck was casually cut, and the incision was dotted with golden light, and it didn't dissipate for a long time, as if it was permanently imprinted on it, and it couldn't be erased. Kacha. Kinsusanu's huge body and head were directly cut in two. It's a pity that the distance is too far, and I can't completely control it. Otherwise, that kid would have been directly crushed like Kinsusanu. Helplessly shaking his head, Dustless sighed with disappointment, and his eyes were full of pity. Maybe if he moved a little more, Kinsusanu's body would have been cut. Compared to Dustless, who was full of disappointment, Uchiha Sasuke was stunned, and he turned his head and stared at Dustless in horror. He never felt that death was so close to him. Damn kid, don't show off. Seeing that Uchiha Sasuke was still in shock, with cold sweat on his forehead, and even the hair on his temples was sweaty, Dustless suddenly felt happy, and his face was flushed, and he was full of energy. According to Dustless's personal guess, Tenseigan is more inclined to attack, such as powerful moves like Golden Wheel Reincarnation Explosion, while Rinnegan is more inclined to seal, such as super powerful seals like Chibaku Tensei. Of course, Rinnegan still varies according to the individual's ability. In addition, Otsutsuki Kagaya's 9 Tomo Rinnegan, which is the legendary Rinnegan Sharingan, is also a special case. In short, there is nothing absolute in the world. One thing is certain, Tenseigan and Rinnegan have their own strengths and weaknesses, and they work together perfectly. It's really the perfect combination, and it also makes him more determined to defeat Uchiha Sasuke, take everything from him, and open his own Rinnegan. That move just now must be the so-called Tenseigan Jutsu. It's really not an ordinary eye. Staring at Dustless's right eye, Uchiha Sasuke thought calmly thinking about countermeasures. There was only a single color in his eyes, and only absolute reason. Let's test you with this move. The black energy ball formed by high-density chakra slowly flew from Uchiha Sasuke's hand to the sky. The dark ball's surface was covered with dark golden light, shrouded in unprecedented gravity, and the whole ground began to buzz and tremble. The ground trembled like the organs in the human body, and it began to squirm. Chibaku Tensei, Amaterasu. Boom! In the endless void, the mysterious black ball was suddenly swallowed by the black ghost fire, and then violently exploded. A huge mushroom cloud swept across the distant sky, and the black smoke didn't dissipate for a long time. Bastard! Seeing this, Uchiha Sasuke roared angrily, and his voice was like thunder. His painstaking plan was instantly seen through by Dustless. How could he not be angry? You're angry over such a trivial matter. Looking at Uchiha Sasuke, Dustless immediately smiled and said, "Or are you saying that you have exhausted your talents? This is the best. I can also save some effort. After all, this is the same as the real world. If I get injured, I will also get injured in the real world. You're dreaming." Glancing at Dustless, Uchiha Sasuke sneered again and again, and a cold, demonic smile appeared on his face. 1, 2, or even 3 Chibaku Tensei. You may be able to destroy them, but if this number is doubled, and it becomes 9, I'll see what you can do. At the end of his words, Uchiha Sasuke's expression suddenly changed, and his 6 Tomo Rinne eyes flashed with a thick murderous aura. His whole body was like a flood dam, and chakra was erupting freely. Chibaku Tensei. Boom, boom, boom. 9 black balls floated to the sky, and 6 black flames rose in the void. Although Dustless destroyed 6 balls in the first place, there were still 3 Chibaku Tensei that successfully avoided Dustless's attack. Kakaka, the 3 high-density black chakra balls suddenly erupted with a strong gravitational force, and the solid ground suddenly collapsed like a piece of paper, exposing the soil and the depths of the ground to the light of the eyes. As far as the eye could see, countless giant mountains were rushing toward the three black spheres in the sky, completely ignoring gravity. Chapter 124. As the most powerful seal of Rinnegan, Chibaku Tensei's power is beyond doubt, and Uchiha Sasuke, who has 6 Tomo Rinnegan, is able to exert the power of Chibaku Tensei to the fullest. In the blink of an eye, the world will collapse, the sun and the moon will become colorless, playing the meaning of the word destruction to the limit. The powerful eye power is far stronger than Uzumaki Nagato. Uchiha Sasuke can launch 9 Chibaku Tensei at once, and he's still strong. If it's Uzumaki Nagato, maybe he will die because of chakra. Where does this guy get his confidence? Following Uchiha Sasuke's gaze, he saw that Dustless's body was also attracted by the gravitational force of Chibaku Tensei, and his body began to slowly float up. However, what puzzled Uchiha Sasuke was that Dustless looked calm. Seeing that he was about to be swallowed by Chibaku Tensei, he didn't show the slightest fear. His temperament was steady and calm, which made Uchiha Sasuke frown slightly. Pretentious. After thinking for a while, Uchiha Sasuke's eyes condensed cold light, and then he just snorted, and then looked at Dustless with a cold expression, and chose to be silent. He looked at Dustless with an indifferent expression. I want to see what means you have to face the attack of 3 Chibaku Tensei and swim safely. Staring at Dustless, Uchiha Sasuke's eyes were in a trance, and then he quickly recovered his calmness, whispering to himself. Wu Chen's expression was rather calm. There was even a faint smile on his face, giving people the feeling of being bathed in the spring breeze. Especially the gentle and pleasant smile at the corners of his mouth. It was completely opposite to his usual murderous and cold style. It's worthy of the jutsu that can seal Otsutsuki Kagaya later. Looking up slightly, looking at the black beads above his head full of endless gravity, Dustless couldn't help but sigh. Although this can't be compared to the scale of Rikudo, Chibaku Tensei, the gravitational force on it is enough to easily overturn everything. As far as the eye could see, the horizon had changed. But this kind of thing can't get rid of me. Staring at the terrifying black sphere, Dustless's lips curled into a cold smile. The materialized evil chakra gushed out and covered Dustless's body. Kinsusunu, holding the katana of light, suddenly appeared and covered Dustless's body. The materialized giant was wearing the Tengu armor. Even though it wasn't as huge as Sasuke's ultimate body, in terms of momentum, it wasn't weaker than Sasuke's ultimate body. Explode. As Dustless's voice fell, Kinsusunu's katana of light slashed towards the Chibaku Tensei. The entire horizon suddenly trembled, and a blazing wave of fire burst out, and an incomparably hot wave of air swept out like a wave. Is that his Kinsusunu? How is that possible? How can a mature Kinsusunu be so big? Seeing that the Chibaku Tensei was destroyed by Dustless's Kinsusunu, Ling-Er transformed into Uchiha Sasuke didn't care much. He also thought that this trick couldn't get rid of Dustless. But what surprised him was that the mature Kinsusunu's physique was really scary. It was just a little shorter than his ultimate body, Kinsusunu. There are still 2 left, staring at the remaining 2 Chibaku Tensei, still filled with irresistible gravity. Dustless and Kinsusunu raised his eyebrows slightly, and then his body rushed forward. The katana of light was ready to be used and swept out. Boom! 2 golden airwaves suddenly shot out from the long blade. The sharp whistling sound made people's ears hurt. The golden luster cut through the thistles and thorns like the autumn wind sweeping away the fallen leaves. It easily destroyed the 2 Chibaku heavenly stars. At a glance, there were only 3 blazing fires in the blue sky. It seems that your Rinnegan is just... Looking at Uchiha Sasuke's face, Dustless chuckled leisurely, and his Tensigen rippled faintly and said faintly, Rinnegan is just so. I hope I can still be so leisurely and calm after this. Suppressing the burning anger in his heart, Uchiha Sasuke could be said to be burning with anger. Even if he hit it well, anyone could see his anger, and immediately said to Dustless in a cold voice, "If you want to destroy him, first make him crazy." Seeing this, Dustless laughed in his heart. Uchiha Sasuke's temper is quite impulsive, and now he saw that the strongest seal of Rinnegan was easily broken by him. For the extremely arrogant and conceited Uchiha Sasuke, Dustless's move has completely angered him, and now it's completely adding fuel to the fire. The characters in the system are almost exactly the same as in the real world. Whether it's personality or strength, there is no change. This kid's Eye of Reincarnation is really strong. Although Dustless showed that Uchiha Sasuke was extremely disdainful, he had to admit that Uchiha Sasuke's 6-Tomo Rinnegan is indeed great, and he can launch 9 consecutive Chibaku Tensei in the state of one eye at the same time. Whoosh! The sound of the air breaking sounded, and the blazing fire could be felt from far away. Looking up, the scene reflected in his eyes was a black arrow whistling through the air, flashing with a dark light, revealing a blazing fire that could devour everything, and its power was very powerful. This is the ability of his Eternal Mangekyo. It seems that he can control Amaterasu's mentality and turn Amaterasu into any form according to his will. Frowning slightly, Wu Chun stared at the black arrow flying towards him. He was not afraid at all. He gently raised his right arm, opened his 5 fingers, and shot out a repulsive force towards Amaterasu's black arrow. Boom! The black arrow formed by Amaterasu suddenly burst and fell to the ground like raindrops. Not to mention hurting Dustless, it was extremely difficult to get close to him. Chapter 125. Dustless only got the Tenseigan a short time ago, and, just like Sasuke's Rinnegan, it's also a monocular state. However, Dustless has long been familiar with the flexible application of the Tenseigan, and most of its abilities have been completely and perfectly mastered. Now, it's just the basic ability of controlling the repulsion force. Dustless naturally has no problem, and he easily scattered the Amaterasu into countless black dots. Tenseigan, both offensive and defensive, and its pure attack power is even stronger than Rinnegan. Gazing at the scattered Amaterasu, the surprise in Sasuke's eyes disappeared, and he calmed down and looked at Dustless solemnly. "I've played enough. In fact, it's just a matter of a moment to deal with you." Looking at Dustless's face without a smile, Sasuke's indifferent tone suddenly changed, and he looked at Dustless with an extremely serious expression. The confidence he showed made Dustless stunned, as if he was sure that he could defeat him. "Don't talk nonsense. If you have the ability, just do it." Frowning, Dustless waved his hand impatiently and said with a displeased expression, indicating Sasuke to do it. "No matter what ninjutsu in this world, there are weaknesses. Even my Rinnegan is no exception." Ignoring Dustless's impatience, Sasuke said to himself, "The so-called ninjutsu have unknown weaknesses and loopholes. My Rinnegan is no exception, and your so-called Tenseigan is no exception." Looking at Wuchin's Tenseigan, Uchiha Sasuke, who was usually silent, was extraordinarily talkative at this moment, and continued, "I can see that your Tenseigan belongs to the type that is extremely powerful in physical attack. What do you want to say?" Slightly frowning, Wu Chen's handsome face remained calm and asked indifferently. He always felt that Uchiha Sasuke's tone was insinuating with a different meaning. In other words, the Tenseigan represents absolute power, and other aspects are extremely weak, such as this. With a cold smile, Sasuke sneered gloomily, and the 6-Tomo Rinnegan swayed strongly, and the majestic spiritual fluctuations directly poured into Dustless's mind. Dustless's eyes turned into circles of Rinnegan. Obviously, he was hit by the Rinnegan Jinjutsu. In the unknown world, there was a white mist like the beginning of the world, and the light was particularly dim. "Allay. It seems that I was careless. I forgot that when the kid was born with the Rinnegan, he also got some unknown Jinja." In the strange world, a rather helpless voice sounded. Dustless touched his forehead in distress, and secretly scolded himself for being careless and negligent, which allowed Sasuke's plot to succeed. However, as Sasuke said, Dustless's Tensigen has no way to defend against these Genjutsu. And as he said, you can't have your cake and eat it too. The Tensigen has the power to destroy everything, and resisting Genjutsu is really not a compliment. Perhaps this is one of the weaknesses of the Tensigen. Of course, Dustless doesn't know whether Otsutsuki's Tensigen can resist Genjutsu. After all, the ability of Tensigen varies from person to person. Well, I hope you can still be so optimistic when I tear you to pieces. Uchiha Sasuke came out of the void like a ghost. Dustless said that the situation was not optimistic, but anyone could hear that Dustless didn't care. It's a very powerful Genjutsu. Looking at the almost boundless world around him from the corner of his eyes, Dustless praised generously. Facing such a terrifying Genjutsu, he really can't solve it for the time being. Don't worry, I won't let you die so easily. Cold killing intent surged in Lang-Er's eyes. Uchiha Sasuke, who had transformed into Lang-Er, revealed his killing intent and said coldly, "You can treat this as an illusion that is countless times stronger than Tsukuyomi. Everything in this world is under my control. In this world, I am the god of creation." Uchiha Sasuke said with unruly hatred. "Is that so?" Hearing this, Dustless just smiled with relief, without too much emotional fluctuation. His eyes were filled with calmness, as if Uchiha Sasuke in the Genjutsu world had switched places with him. "Humph. Now I will let you understand the horror of this Rinnegan Genjutsu." The killing intent in his eyes condensed into ice, and Uchiha Sasuke sneered. Immediately, under Dustless's gaze, Uchiha Sasuke suddenly stared at Dustless's right arm. Kacha, intense pain spread all over his body. Dustless was taken aback and subconsciously looked at his right arm. Not bad. The scene that came into view was quite miserable. Dustless's right arm had been completely twisted, like a twisted dough twist, and the bones were no longer formed. "This is just an appetizer, enjoy it." As Uchiha Sasuke's voice fell, Dustless's left arm was also twisted, and the difference between the bones and flesh could no longer be distinguished. An unprecedented pain spread throughout his body like a tide. Dustless's delicate little face instantly turned as pale as paper, and his body fell to the ground like a kite with a broken string. This feeling should be unforgettable for a lifetime. Seeing that Dustless's arms had been completely twisted, Uchiha Sasuke stepped forward and looked at Dustless, who fell to the ground and was about to lose consciousness. Without hesitation, he pulled out the Kusanagi sword from his waist. The cold light reflected in Dustless's eyes, and the former's eyes were full of despair. Just glancing at Dustless, Uchiha Sasuke didn't have the slightest mercy. After a long while, Dustless's entire body was dripping with blood. Finally dead, seeing the bloody holes all over Dustless's body, including his breathing and heartbeat, Uchiha Sasuke took back his Kusanagi sword. "It took a lot of effort. Finally, Pucci, you finally killed me, but I'm sorry you are too weak." Uchiha Sasuke turned around and saw Dustless with a sly smile, and at the same time, a golden sword was inserted into Uchiha Sasuke's abdomen. It was Dustless holding the Kusanagi sword with a smile on his face. Chapter 126. Lowering his head, Uchiha Sasuke looked at the golden sword that penetrated his abdomen. His eyes were dull. Then he looked up and saw Dustless's cold face with a fox-like sneer. His pupils instantly dilated, and his mind was like paste. He instantly lost the ability to think. Impossible. Resisting the urge to vomit blood in his heart, Uchiha Sasuke clenched his teeth and broke free from the sword. The stinging and burning pain suddenly spread from his abdomen to every corner of his body. Dustless was just stabbed to death by him. Uchiha Sasuke still remembered the scene of hundreds of bloody holes in his body. Impossible? What makes you think it's impossible? Looking at Uchiha Sasuke with a faint smile on his face, Dustless asked with interest. His tone was full of disdain. "It's ridiculous to think that you're omnipotent. Because this world was created by me, and I am an omnipotent god." Ignoring Dustless's sarcasm, Uchiha Sasuke recovered. Dustless's pierced abdomen healed in a blink of an eye. Then he looked at the indifferent Dustless gloomily. When he said the word God, he deliberately emphasized the word, for fear that Dustless couldn't understand what he meant. Is that so? The world you created as a god. How can you be hurt by me? Dustless asked, looking at the gloomy Uchiha Sasuke with disdain. His face was full of contempt, and with endless sneer, a world created by Genjutsu dares to call itself a god. It's really ridiculous. And as Uchiha Sasuke said before, all Genjutsu created by human beings have loopholes. Dustless's Tensigen does have weaknesses, but Uchiha Sasuke's Rinnegan Genjutsu also has weaknesses. It's ridiculous for him to regard himself as a special existence. I might as well tell you, I can ignore any Genjutsu in the world. No exception to Genjutsu. Only physical attacks can affect me. Giving Uchiha Sasuke a sympathetic look, Dustless told the truth. Uchiha Sasuke's Rinnegan Genjutsu is not a common thing. Dustless still remembers that after sealing Otsutsuki Kagaya, Uchiha Sasuke and Uzumaki Naruto had a shocking battle. At that time, Sasuke just casually glanced at the nine-tailed beasts and completely controlled them, and then used Chibaku Tensei to seal them. It can be seen how terrifying Uchiha Sasuke's Rinnegan Genjutsu is. Genjutsu. Let's see if your ability is really that great. Uchiha Sasuke was furious when he heard this. He was so angry that he didn't care about any bullshit tactics. As the god of creation of this world, everything in the world was under his control. He could destroy Dustless with a flick of his finger. Crack! With a wave of his hand, a hurricane swept over and instantly split Wu Chen's body into several pieces. It was a clean and thorough dismemberment. You're just an ant. Seeing this, Uchiha Sasuke curled his lips, his face full of disdain. You're the one who made a mistake. The ghostly voice sounded again. Dustless's Genjutsu body recovered and looked at Uchiha Sasuke, who was stunned. It seems that you, the god who created the world, is not very useful. You can't kill me, an intruder. Dustless's mocking voice was filled with endless ridicule. He was extremely disgusted with Uchiha Sasuke. This should be his Mangekyo or his Tensigen ability. Uchiha Sasuke's face was livid, his fists clenched, and his eyes were fixed on Dustless's foxy smile. He was so depressed that he vomited blood. The world in front of him is equivalent to the infinitely magnified Tsukuyomi world. Its power is much stronger than Tsukuyomi. As the god of creation in Tsukuyomi world, he can be ridiculed by Dustless, a jutsu that can ignore any Genjutsu. Bastard, how can such a ninjutsu exist? Uchiha Sasuke's face was extremely ugly. A jutsu that can ignore any Genjutsu in the world is beyond the scope of ninjutsu. It seems that you're at your wit's end. The so-called god of creation is really disappointing. Slightly raising his eyelids, Dustless deliberately emphasized the word god of creation. He stretched his tone, fearing that Uchiha Sasuke couldn't understand what he meant. Goodbye. The so-called god of creation, Tsukuyomi. Puchi. In the outside world, Uchiha Sasuke suddenly began to vomit blood. His handsome, smiling face became pale like paper. He couldn't bear the burden and knelt on the ground with half of his leg. His bright eyes dimmed, full of hesitation. Suddenly, the corner of his mouth raised a self-deprecating smile. Uchiha Sasuke's face was even more embarrassed. I'm afraid that he's the first person to use Rinnegan Genjutsu and get backfired on by the opponent. What is that guy pursuing in his heart? How could he give birth to such a ninjutsu? Looking at the expressionless Dustless, who seemed to be out of tune with the whole world, Uchiha Sasuke said incredulously, any dojutsu is almost inextricably linked to the host's heart. Dustless can have such an unheard of jutsu, which shows exactly what his heart wants. Seeing Uchiha Sasuke looking at himself in horror, Dustless's mouth raised a smile without a trace. In fact, the jutsu he just showed was a ninjutsu born from Mangekyo's right eye after he merged with Hashirama's cells. Although this jutsu is extremely heaven-defying, Dustless didn't care. because it only belongs to the category of passive defense. There is no one who can make Dustless defend passively, so he hasn't used it, and it's only effective against Genjutsu. I might as well tell you, the jutsu just now is called omniscient and omnipotent. The principle is just like its literal meaning. Any ninjutsu that I know can't hurt me. Of course, only those who are immune to it, such as Genjutsu, are immune to physical attacks. Dustless said honestly, it's okay to tell Uchiha Sasuke. Anyway, he's just a simulation character. Staring at the sluggish face of Uchiha Sasuke, Dustless said in a deep voice, whether it's Kodoa Mitsukami, Izanami, or Infinite Tsukuyomi, these jutsu that I know can't affect me. As the name says, omniscient and omnipotent. Know everything. Ignore everything. Chapter 127. To be fair, Dustless really doesn't value this jutsu much. Even if he is very powerful and can ignore any ability he knows, whether it's the so-called Infinite Tsukuyomi, the strongest Genjutsu Kodoa Mitsukami, or even Izanami, but in the end, it's a passive defense. Dustless is not the kind of person who is passive defense. There are only a few people who can make Dustless adopt a passive defense strategy. Well, the next step is how to take everything from you. Murderous intent flashed in his eyes, and his sharp eyes stared at Uchiha Sasuke on the ground. Dustless's heart couldn't help but jump to his throat. Once Uchiha Sasuke is completely killed, it means that he will take everything from him and inherit his identity as Indra's reincarnation. Dustless's body also implanted Hashirama's cells, which means that it is possible to evolve again after taking Uchiha Sasuke's 6th Tomo Rinnegan. Whoosh! A black shadow suddenly fell. Dustless was slightly stunned, staring at the fragments of clothes floating at his feet. His eyes flashed. Uchiha Sasuke used 6 Tomo Rinnegan's jutsu heavenly hand power to attack him. Get out of my way! Dustless suddenly shouted. His voice was like rolling thunder, and at the same time, a strong repulsive force broke out of his body and directly bounced Uchiha Sasuke's sword. What a powerful force! Uchiha Sasuke flew back dozens of feet, barely supporting his body, pinching his numb right arm, and then looked at Dustless with a heavy heart. Summoning Jutsu. Kyubi. Manjikyu Sharingan flashed decisively, and Uchiha Sasuke didn't hesitate to summon Kyubi. Its huge orange body was almost the same size as the mountain, and the behemoth with 9 tails was exposed in front of Dustless. Its scarlet eyes were filled with endless killing intent, and its sharp claws could easily pierce through everything in the world. Its strong and powerful arms were filled with explosive power. Why is there a Kyubi? Looking at the summoning of Kyubi, Dustless was extremely speechless. He can understand that Uchiha Madara has Kyubi, but what does Kyubi have to do with Uchiha Sasuke? Is it because Uchiha Sasuke once joined forces with Uzumaki Naruto to summon Kyubi? Forget it. Let nature take its course. He smiled bitterly and comforted himself. Dustless knew that this was the perverted part of the system. No matter what trick, no matter whether it was related to Uchiha Sasuke or not, as long as it was used, Uchiha Sasuke can use it in the world of the system. Because this Uchiha Sasuke himself was transformed from the system Ling, he was omnipotent, including the psychic Kyubi. Kinsusuno. Under Wu Chen's astonished gaze, 9 Tails put on the purple armor. Her aura was even more piercingly cold. Her physique was undoubtedly bigger and more powerful. Kyubi, wearing Kinsusuno, held a black long sword in his hand, which was made by Uchiha Sasuke using Amaterasu. He didn't need to think about what would happen if he was hit by the black big sword. It's really a tricky technique. Dustless looked at the huge Kyubi cautiously, and his heart inevitably sank. His eyes solidified, and he vigilantly looked at Uchiha Sasuke, standing on top of Kyubi's head. Ayo, ayo, ayo. A deafening roar came out of Kyubi's mouth, as if to celebrate his breaking out of the prison and the joy of seeing the sun again. Kyubi's chakra went berserk, and his feet slammed on the ground, and the whole ground suddenly trembled. Whoa! The sawtooth mouth full of fangs opened, and a black energy ball formed in an instant. The high-density chakra energy ball was huge, and the aura of destruction around it made people unconsciously desperate. So big. Feeling the hurricane thrown out by the high-speed rotation of the giant Bijadama, Dustless's face changed slightly, and he was very cautious, staring at the expanding energy ball, and his eyes flashed with a touch of determination. Uchiha Fire Formation. Boom! A crimson flame wall emerged from Kyuubi's feet, and the high temperature of the flame barrier instantly exploded the Bijadama that Kyuubi painstakingly condensed, and it suddenly burst open and swallowed Kyuubi's body. What a thick turtle shell! Looking through the heavy black smoke, Dustless clearly saw the Kinsusinu on Kyuubi's body, and all the power of the explosion just now was isolated from Kyuubi's body. The ultimate body Kinsusinu's defense was beyond doubt, and the only time it was completely broken was during the battle between Uchiha Madara and Hashirama in the Valley of the End. Kacha! Kyuubi, who was blown away by the explosion of the Bijadama, immediately rushed forward, and the sharp sword in his hand poured down, destroying Dustless's Uchiha Fire Formation. You're going to die. Looking contemptuously at the barrier that was destroyed by Kyuubi's overwhelming power, Sasuke seemed to have regained his confidence after being trampled on. Then he looked down at Wu Chun with disdain and affection on his face. You don't understand human feelings, boy. Seeing this, Dustless just touched his nose and didn't feel any surprise because Uchiha Sasuke is such a proud and conceited person. Of course, with his current strength, he indeed has the ability to despise Dustless. In that case, I will completely erase you and the Kyuubi under your feet. After observing the Kyuubi under Sasuke's feet for a while, Dustless's murderous intent burst out, and the murderous intent in his words made people tremble. Anyway, even if this Kyuubi has nothing to do with the real world, it's just a simulation of the system. It's not a big deal if it dies. Take this. With Dustless's angry shout, several green beads suddenly appeared in front of him, rotating with a distance between each other and the size of a disc. It was full of endless ominous. That trick again. This guy can't use that without limit. Damn it. Doesn't he have dojutsu restrictions? Seeing this, Sasuke's face slightly changed, and his face became ugly. At the same time, Dustless's cold voice resounded through the sky. Golden Wheel Reincarnation Explosion. Chapter 128. Feeling the endless sharpness of the golden light beam, Uchiha Sasuke's face changed, and his eyelids couldn't help but twitch. Anyone can see the hidden fear in his eyes. The move in front of him is obviously a dojutsu, and the power is extremely great, enough to easily split the world. It can be imagined that the amount of dojutsu consumed is definitely much more than Chibaku Tensei. However, what made Uchiha Sasuke speechless is that Dustless is too much of a monster. The previous battle should have consumed a lot of dojutsu, and now he can use such a shocking move like Golden Wheel Reincarnation Explosion. It seems that there is no limit at all. It seems that I can only fight hard. His eyes suddenly emitted a burst of light. Uchiha Sasuke's eyes surged with killing intent, facing the golden light beam in Dustless's hand. His face was full of eagerness. Obviously, Uchiha Sasuke is obviously not the kind of lamb that likes to wait for death. Oh, good fighting spirit. Feeling the strong fighting spirit of Uchiha Sasuke, Dustless smiled, and then his eyes slightly narrowed, and the light from his eyes was extremely dangerous. Combined with Dustless's aura, it really made people feel extremely oppressed and afraid. Whoosh! The golden light beam stretched without limit. Although it was only the size of a thumb, the bright afterglow covered the entire system world, and the sharpness of the light beam made people tremble. So long. Looking at the endless light, even with Uchiha Sasuke's calm mentality, he couldn't help but secretly smack his tongue. His face was horrified, his eyes were extremely unnaturally enlarged, and even the corner of his mouth was slightly trembling. Although he had seen it twice before, facing this light beam that covered the whole world, Uchiha Sasuke's heart couldn't help but feel small, as if he encountered an unprecedented natural enemy, making him extremely uncomfortable. Whoosh! The black shadow suddenly slid down rapidly, and suddenly looked up. It was Dustless with a cold face, controlling the golden light beam to sweep the Kyuubi under Sasuke's beast disaster. The golden light revealed its sharpness, crushing everything in its path with an unstoppable momentum, as if it was looking down on all living things. Along the way, several giant mountains that were thousands of meters tall were directly cut in half, easily piercing through them as if they were pieces of paper. It directly whistled towards the side of the nine-tailed beast calamity. From the looks of it, it wanted to completely split the nine-tailed beast body in half, just like how it cut the mountain in half before. We have to stop it. On top of Kyuubi's head, Uchiha Sasuke's pupils suddenly shrank. He smelled a strong sense of death from that unstoppable light. Huh! A huge purple longbow suddenly appeared in Kyuubi's hand, and the black arrow made of Amaterasu was clearly visible. Kyuubi's face was ferocious, and his strong arm pulled the bowstring to the limit and shot it with the most ferocious force. So, the big hand that tightly pulled the bowstring suddenly loosened, and the black arrow suddenly shot out, going up against the current, and the friction in the air made a white wave. Overconfident, trying to shake the world with the power of floater, this is unrealistic. Seeing the black arrow roaring out with ferocious momentum, it was not difficult to see that it wanted to break Dustless's golden wheel reincarnation explosion, trying to delay the attack of the light beam on Kyuubi. Ridiculous. Slightly shaking his head, Dustless looked at the two attacks that were about to collide. The black arrow cut through the void and inevitably collided with the light beam. However, what surprised everyone was that the two tyrannical forces didn't explode and cancel each other out. The golden light instantly swallowed the black arrow that came in contact with it. Bastard! Uchiha Sasuke's mouth twitched fiercely, and then he didn't hesitate to escape from the beast disaster and jumped into the sky, his eyes fixed on the sweeping light beam, and his face was full of horror. Pucci! The Susanoo wrapped around the Kyuubi was easily torn apart like clothes. It couldn't withstand a single blow, and the ultimate form Susanoo that gave the world supreme pressure was instantly annihilated and cut off. Ken Susanoo's Kyuubi also couldn't escape death. Under Uchiha Sasuke's stunned gaze, he saw the straight golden light passing through Kyuubi's orange body, and Kyuubi's body was easily divided, along with the ultimate body Ken Susanoo. It was cut in half. Boom! Kyuubi's upper body, which was cut in half, fell to the ground like a mountain, and the ground trembled fiercely, raising smoke and dust. This guy actually killed Kyuubi. Looking at the cut Kyuubi in disbelief, Uchiha Sasuke's pupils dilated and lost their bright color. No wonder he was so surprised. After all, this was Kyuubi's first real death. Don't show such a surprised expression. Don't worry, I'll send you to accompany him. On the ground, Dustless's body glowed with a golden luster, crossing layers of space. And when he reappeared, he was already beside Uchiha Sasuke, and the Kusanagi sword in his hand swept across. The cold light was about to cut him into pieces. Clang! At this critical moment, Uchiha Sasuke pulled out the Kusanagi sword from his waist to block Dustless's attack. The huge force from his arm made him slightly stunned. He didn't expect Dustless's strength to be so great, and looking at Dustless's calm appearance, it was obvious that he didn't use all his strength. Laser! Dustless didn't have any surprise when he saw this, and he flicked the golden light beam. Pucci! Caught off guard, or even unable to react, Uchiha Sasuke's chest and arm were directly penetrated by the burning light beam, and he could clearly see the small hole in the sky on the other side. Lightspeed kick. Boom! Boom! The strong and powerful leg bombarded Uchiha Sasuke's body, and suddenly his chest caved in, and then he slammed heavily on the ground, creating a deep pit. Chapter 129. Dustless looked at the half-dead Uchiha Sasuke expressionlessly, waved his hand, and countless golden light poured down. His vitality is quite strong. Feeling Sasuke's weak breathing, Dustless's eyes flashed with surprise, and suddenly a tiredness that he had never felt before poured into his mind. Dustless's vision was blurred, and his eyes were slightly stinging, so Dustless subconsciously closed his eyes. After fusing with Hashirama's cells, this was the first time he felt this physical exhaustion. Is this the side effect of overusing dojutsu? It's really a long-lost feeling. Dustless's arm gently rubbed the corner of his eyes, and when he opened his eyes again, his eyeballs were covered with blood like a spider's web, swallowing the entire eyeball. Both eyes were the same, especially the tensigen in the right eye, red and blue mixed with each other, and it was particularly terrifying. Kinsusunu Chidori. Seeing Dustless's tiredness after using his dojutsu, Sasuke seized the opportunity to rush towards Dustless. Kinsusunu's hand flashed with dazzling lightning, making it impossible to look directly at it. You think I overuse my dojutsu, so you want to sneak attack me? Stupid. Dustless's voice was filled with endless chill and sneer. It's too ridiculous to think that he can't do anything to Sasuke because of his excessive dojutsu. Uchiha Flame Formation. Boom. The ultimate body, Kinsusunu's huge body, was not easy to move, and Dustless's attack was a sudden attack, so naturally, it was inevitable that he had a close contact with the flame barrier. The heavy armor was suddenly melted by the blazing flame wall and quickly peeled off layer by layer, and Kinsusunu was about to turn into ashes. Break for me! Accompanied by Sasuke's roar, Kinsusunu's right hand's Chidori bombarded the flame barrier, and the flame barrier that dyed the sky red immediately burst, and the sky was clear again. Good opportunity! Dustless's pupil suddenly burst out. Because of the melting of Kinsusunu before, his defense was much weaker than before, and even the left half of his arm was completely melted. Silver Wheel Reincarnation Explosion. Whoosh! The huge tornado swept out unscrupulously, and it swept straight towards Kinsusunu, who was already dying. Dustless's chakra was almost exhausted, and its range was naturally larger than before. Ninjutsu has no limit. It is completely different for the caster. Dustless injected chakra without reservation, and the giant tornado became larger as a result, like a spring in the deep sea, crazily swallowing everything around it. After fighting for half a day, Dustless's dojutsu power reached its limit, and so did Uchiha Sasuke. At this moment, the ultimate body Susanoo was completely swallowed by the hurricane. Poochie Poochie. The moment the tornado shrouded, Kinsusunu was like being cut by hundreds of millions of blades at the same time, and his defense completely collapsed and dissipated. In just a few breaths, he was completely swept away, and Sasuke was soon exposed to the tornado. The same scene played out as Kinsusunu. It seems that the kid is finally dead. Seeing Sasuke's flesh and blood flying everywhere, Dustless was relieved and casually found a place to sit on the ground, looking dispirited and listless. It seems that Dustless also reached his limit. As for Sasuke, he became a pile of white bones. It's really a complete destruction. Dustless saw this and took a deep breath. Originally, Silver Wheel Reincarnation Explosion didn't have this kind of power, but because he injected chakra without reservation, this technique produced a qualitative change and gave Sasuke a fatal blow. In other words, suddenly remembering that Sasuke was completely destroyed by himself, Dustless's eyes were full of light, and he realized that he will soon inherit everything. This is inside the body. Suddenly warm power flowed out, wandering around the meridians, moistening Dustless's body. This strange and familiar energy was quite strange, and there was a feeling of enlightenment in his heart. It was very similar to Dustless's blood. This is the power of Uchiha Sasuke, gently closing his eyes, carefully savoring the amazing changes in his body. After coming to this world for so many years, Dustless was relieved. Only by having Rinnegan and Tensigen at the same time, Dustless can sit back and relax. After all, the strength of the late-stage characters is obvious to all. They're either Rikudo level or Quasi-Rikudo. Although Dustless is extremely conceited, he is not confident that he will be invincible against them, let alone defeat them completely. And there is also the existence of Otsutsuki Kagaya, who is known as the god of creation. It's so itchy, Dustless subconsciously rubbed his eyes. He felt itchy in his eye sockets, as if something had grown out. It was filled with strong vitality and an indescribable throbbing he had never felt before. Dustless can't tell the specific feeling. No, the Mangekyo of the left and right eyes have strengthened. After carefully feeling for a while, Dustless suddenly opened his eyes. Ecstatically, and even with a rare tremor in his voice, he can clearly feel that his Mangekyo's eye power has increased in an instant, and it is completely different from before. It is not an exaggeration to say that it is a dimensional gap. It seems that it has become Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. Although the shape of the Mangekyo in Dustless's left eye has not changed, the eye power has been different, and it has exceeded the level of Mangekyo Sharingan. It is worthy of the name Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. This is his left eye suddenly swayed with stronger energy fluctuations, even stronger than the Mangekyo that was born just now. The blood was dense, and the violent chakra was surging in the eye socket, and the eyeball was about to burst. Dustless can clearly feel that his left eye has turned purple, and a circle of mysterious black ripples spread from it, and there is some black tomo hanging from it. Chapter 130. Dustless's left eye was unusually itchy, as if tens of thousands of ants were biting it. The pain was unbearable, and he couldn't help but grab his left eye. "Don't worry, your left eye is evolving." A light voice stopped Dustless's action. She looked up slightly. It was Ling, who was devastatingly beautiful. She was wearing a simple and elegant dress. Her 3,000 deep black willow hair danced in the wind. Her slender figure was like the breeze of time, which couldn't be touched. She was exceptionally ethereal, as if she had walked out of a painting. She gave people a feeling of a goddess above the ninth heaven. Even today, I still feel this way. Raising his eyelids and glancing at Ling, Dustless shook his head. No matter when Ling gave him the feeling of looking at flowers in the fog, there's always a layer of fog, and he couldn't completely see through her, and her whole body was covered with a mysterious veil. Shaking his head, Dustless could only smile bitterly. The so-called Tensigen's super insight ability couldn't see through Ling. This is not a gap in distance, but a gap in strength. Of course, I can feel that my left eye is evolving. Dustless glanced at Ling, and he could naturally feel the 6 black tomo in his left eye, as well as the purple pupil. These were the spoils of war after he defeated Uchiha Sasuke. He took everything from Uchiha Sasuke. But then again, feeling that his left eye was a pure 6 tomo Rinnegan, Dustless frowned slightly and wondered, I already have the identity of Indra's reincarnation, and at the same time, I have Azura's chakra in my body, and when the 2 chakra touch, the power of the 6 paths will be born. Now, as Indra's reincarnation, I should awaken Rinnegan. Dustless's face was full of confusion. It's reasonable to say that this is only Uchiha Sasuke's Rinnegan, and his own Rinnegan hasn't been born yet. This will take time. Don't forget, after Uchiha Madara implanted Hashirama's flesh, it took many years to awaken Rinnegan. Glancing at Dustless, Ling faintly explained. That's true. Although he felt that Ling-er's words were perfunctory, the fact was that when Madara opened his Rinnegan, he was indeed 100 years old. I'm afraid that no one in the world will be your match in the future. Ling stared deeply into Dustless's eyes as she calmly explained. Her tone seemed to hold Dustless in high esteem, but in Dustless's eyes, it had a different meaning. Who knows? Dustless glanced at Ling, and then stood up. He moved his body slightly, and the sound of bones cracking could be heard. His eyes were indifferent as he stared at the void in front of him. His clear eyes flickered with an elusive light. In the rain-hidden village, in an unknown secret room. Dustless, what happened to you? Who could injure you like this? Looking at the battered and exhausted Wu Chun, Otsutsuki Yulaw frowned slightly. She circled around Wu Chun and immediately touched her chin with her slender fingers. She said in disbelief, "What kind of person can make you like this?" Although Dustless didn't have any wounds on his body, his face was pale and his eyes were dull, as if he had just recovered from a serious illness. His temperament was abnormal, with a sense of dispiritedness. Taking a glance at Wuchen, Otsutsuki Haruo carefully helped him to sit down, looking like a pretty girl from a humble family, without the usual indifference. This made Dustless feel a little flattered. "I'm fine. It's just that my eye power was severely overdrawn." Waving his hand, he signaled Otsutsuki Yukaro not to worry. Wu Chun immediately smiled, giving people a feeling of gentleness. After the battle with Uchiha Sasuke in the system, Dustless's eyes still hadn't recovered, and his physical condition was not good. His eyes were damaged in the system, and the same was true in the real world. Where did that kid Obito go? He's not learning ninjutsu from that old guy Uchiha Madara again, is he? Kuroda was speechless and asked Haguro. Since Obito was pulled into hell by him, he didn't give up on practicing ninjutsu. He worked very hard, thinking all day long about when to attack Konoha. Isn't this all your fault? That Uzumaki Nagato is the same. Rolling her eyes, Haguro gave Dustless a big, supercilious look. Yahiko was deliberately killed under Dustless's indifference. Therefore, Uzumaki Nagato fell into the devil's path and became completely desperate in the real world. Rin was also controlled by Dustless, and then she was killed. And Obito, who she saw with her own eyes, was completely corrupted. So, Dustless took Madara's part and dominated everything. Isn't that good? As long as this is the case, they will obey my orders. Dustless chuckled and shrugged casually. He didn't care about this. Anyway, if he didn't do this, Madara would do it in the future. What are you going to do next? Staring at Dustless's eyes, Haguro whispered, "I'm afraid that Obito will attack Konoha soon." Speaking of this, Otsutsuki Hagoromo's voice stopped. Although Obito's strength has improved rapidly, especially under Madara's guidance, he is still not an opponent of Yellow Flash Minato. Let him go. That kid won't calm down if he doesn't vent his anger and turn Konoha upside down. Dustless's eyes were deep and long. Obito was still useful to him. Frowning slightly, he whispered, "When the time comes, I'll go to Konoha with Obito." Although Obito was safe in the end, just in case, Dustless chose to accompany him to Konoha. It will be best to recover the Kyuubi. Now, the Hachibi is in his hands, and so is the Geto Mazo. It's really a headache. I hope that little Tanuki doesn't get killed. Now, the only one of the nine-tailed beasts whose whereabouts was unknown was a Chibi Shikaku. If he didn't take care to kill it, then even if Wuchen wanted to cry, he wouldn't have a place to cry. He could only silently pray that this little raccoon cat would survive this disaster. Resurrecting the Jubi is essential. Chapter 131. It's no wonder that Dustless is so worried about the safety of the Chibi. After all, it's related to the resurrection of the Jubi. Although he can find chakra, no one in the world has a Chibi's chakra. Let's just go with the flow. Shaking his head gently, Dustless no longer entangled this issue. Whether the Chibi is dead or not, it's not something he can control at the moment. There are still many things for him to do. Dustless doesn't want to spend time on this kind of problem that only God knows. Your dojitsu hasn't recovered yet. It's better for me to go to Konoha instead of you. Her beautiful watery eyes looked seriously at Dustless's pale face. Otsutsuki Haguro said worriedly. Dustless is her hope to revive the Otsutsuki clan in the future. Of course, this flower of hope can't wither before it blooms. Don't worry. Looking at Otsutsuki Haguro with a comforting look, Dustless chuckled and said, "Even if my eyes are blind, Senju Hashirama is reborn. Konoha can come and go as I please." When talking about Senju Hashirama, Dustless's mouth swept a contemptuous smile. Even if he is resurrected, Dustless can easily defeat him. Not to mention that Dustless's dojitsu is only temporarily overdrawn. Do as you wish. Seeing that Wu Chan was so determined, especially his confident and exultant look, it was like a shot in the arm. It made Yu Luo silent. She just stood beside Wu Chen quietly. She usually gave people the impression of being cold, but this was the first time she was so well-behaved. At this time, Otsutsuki Haguro was a feast for the eyes. The elegant and natural fragrance rushed into his ears and nose. Dustless was suddenly stunned. Like poison, his eyes were dazed. Dustless, you. Perceiving Dustless's abnormality, Otsutsuki Haguro's face also changed slightly. Being stared at by Dustless, she was quite embarrassed, even though they were already husband and wife. Cough, 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 sorry, I was distracted for a while. Dustless's old face was slightly red. He coughed awkwardly and quickly changed the topic. However, you can rest assured that as a man, it's too shameful to make a woman worry. Face. Hearing this, Yuluo looked at Wu Chan with jealousy and said unhappily, "Only a fool would care about face. I just want to live on peacefully. I don't have much hope." Wu Chan didn't say anything and just looked at Yuluo quietly. He felt a rare satisfaction in his heart, and his face showed a rare, sincere kindness. What else could he ask for in life? Haguro. Haguro, 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 Haguro's Haguro, 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 Haguro. Dustless, wearing a spiral mask, looked at Obito, who was panting on the ground, and smiled under the mask. This kid is so hard to train himself all day long. In the empty depths of the underground, only Obito and Zetsu were left. As for Madara, that old man, he died not long ago. Are you here to stop me from attacking Konoha? Looking at Dustless's spiral mask, Obito didn't need to think to know why Dustless was looking for him. In front of Dustless, he didn't need to wear a mask to hide his identity. Besides Madara, Dustless was the only one who knew his identity. If there's one thing that Obito is most interested in right now, besides the destruction of Konoha, it's the identity of Dustless. He has asked Madara about this matter before, but Madara gave him a perfunctory answer. Until Madara's death, Obito didn't ask who Dustless was. That's not it, and instead of stopping you, I will help you. Dustless smiled. His tone was very flat, which showed that Dustless was serious. Help me? Hearing this, Obito frowned and looked at Dustless in confusion. Although he and Dustless spent a very short time together, it didn't mean that he didn't know what kind of person Dustless was. This is a smiling tiger. Whether it's strength or shrewdness, he's on the same level as Madara. He's definitely a master who eats people without spitting out the bones. Do you think I could trust you? Looking at Dustless faintly, Obito asked. Although before his death, Madara told him that Dustless was reliable and a trustworthy ally, he was no longer the naive boy he was before. It was necessary to explore Dustless's purpose. Dustless-sama. White Zetsu didn't have as complicated thoughts as Obito. He knew that Dustless was a trustworthy existence, at least for now. Humph. Seeing White Zetsu and Dustless's familiarity, Obito just snorted with dissatisfaction and immediately said coldly, "I don't care what your purpose isn't going to Konoha, but Namake's Minato will die." Speaking of this, Obito's eyes were filled with murderous intent, and he looked very fierce. Idiot. Dustless saw this and smiled contemptuously, thinking, even if you're a villain on the same level as Madara, after all, you're just a pawn of mine. Shaking his head, the gap between Obito and Madara wasn't small at all. When Minato's wife gives birth, I will take the opportunity to attack and extract the Kyuubi from Uzumaki Kushina's body. After pondering for a while, Obito spoke of his plan. As for the life and death of his former master's wife, it doesn't matter to him anymore. Anyway, Obito's goal is to avenge Rin's death. That's not a problem. I will help you contain the rest of Konoha. Seeing Obito so insistent that Minato killed Rin Noara, Dustless was relieved. Fortunately, he used the Tensegan to perfectly control Rin's mind and body. Otherwise, with Obito's current state of mind, he might have noticed something fishy. Chapter 132. Dustless didn't have any doubts about Obito's plan, because his plan was successful. He successfully released the QB, and although it was a pity that he didn't kill Minato himself, at least he succeeded in killing the couple because of the QB. To some extent, Obito's plan was indeed perfect. Although the QB's plan to destroy Konoha's ninja village was successfully stopped by the fourth Hokage, overall, it was good and feasible. If Dustless-sama joins us, this plan to attack Konoha's ninja village will definitely succeed. White Zetsu has seen Dustless's strength with his own eyes. He can confront Madara head-on, and he's not at a disadvantage. His combat power is absolutely incredible. Compared to Uchiha Obito, he was much stronger. Indeed, Black Zetsu also nodded, but there was a vague fear in his eyes. Even Dustless didn't catch this subtle change. In that case, we will invade Konoha immediately. Obito put on his spiral mask, revealing only his Mangekyo Sharingan, and said murderously. As for Dustless's purpose, Obito was too lazy to ask. Anyway, as Zetsu said, with Dustless's help, the chance of destroying Konoha will only be greater. Unknowingly, the Third Shinobi World War was completely over. Although Konoha also suffered heavy losses, it was much stronger than the other four villages. Especially after the surrender of the rock and the sand, Konoha gained a lot of benefits, and its combat power soared, leaving the cloud behind. The bitter cloud-hidden village could only grit their teeth and swallow their anger, secretly investigating Wuchin's whereabouts. The victory of the Third Shinobi World War established Konoha's position as the overlord. Compared to the other four villages, the whole village was filled with joy and laughter. Sure enough, once people indulge in peace, no matter who they are, they will fall and stop evolving. Minato-sensei, you are the same. Obito, wearing a one-eyed mask, stood on the forest, looking indifferently at the giant village in the distance, and the tone of his voice suddenly changed. Destroy Konoha from now on. Hearing this, Dustless, who was standing next to Obito, glanced at him, then turned his head and looked at the village in front of him indifferently. However, the most shocking thing was that Dustless just stood in the void calmly and quietly, as if he was standing on some invisible support point. He just floated in the sky calmly like that. This guy's ability is really strange, and the people around him are also very strange. Staring at Wuchin floating in the air, Obito's face changed slightly. The surprise in his 3 Tomo Sharingan was clear, especially the woman floating in the air beside Wuchin, which made him even more surprised. It was really strange that these two people could float in the sky without the help of external forces. The woman beside Dustless was naturally Otsutsuki Haruo. The only difference was that Otsutsuki Haruo's eyebrows sometimes appeared lazy, with a sense of maturity that had never been there before, and between her eyebrows, there was an indescribable attraction, just like a peerless demon. Obviously, she had been cured by Dustless a few days ago. However, the only regrettable thing was that the beautiful woman's face was cold at the moment, and she had an expression that rejected people thousands of miles away, especially that extremely indifferent face, which made Obito stop the idea of going forward to talk to her. In the past, he took the initiative to talk to Otsutsuki Haruo, wanting to take advantage of her close relationship with Dustless to ask about Dustless's identity, but he was directly ignored. What's going on? Why do I keep feeling that the woman beside Dustless is familiar? Black Zetsu looked at Otsutsuki Haruo vaguely. He didn't know why, but he always had a feeling of déjà vu, but he couldn't figure out who it was. This strange feeling began from the first time he saw Otsutsuki Haruo. Now start implementing your plan. Obito, I will attack Konoha openly, lure the tiger away from the mountain, and attract the attention of Minato, Sandaime, and other ninjas while you take the opportunity to capture the Kyuubi. Turning his head and glancing at Obito, Dustless then retracted his gaze and looked straight at the huge village in front of him, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. He no longer had any feelings for Konoha. Well, that's the best. Obito nodded. If Dustless could take the initiative to attract the attention of Konoha's ninjas, it would be the best, and the plan to steal the QB would be even more perfect. Dustless also slightly nodded, and immediately turned into a rainbow light and swept straight ahead, followed by Otsutsuki Haruo. Haruo, you go and follow that Uchiha Obito kid. After a long while, Wu Chen's body suddenly stopped, and he ordered Otsutsuki Uluo behind him with a gloomy face. His cold eyes reflected a strong, killing intent. Do you suspect that Uchiha Obito might betray us? Looking at Dustless in surprise, Otsutsuki Haruo tucked the hair on both sides of his bun behind his ears. That's not it. His loyalty to us is unquestionable. Dustless immediately shook his head. Uchiha Obito had been completely corrupted, and naturally, he would side with them. The only thing Dustless was worried about was that the kid couldn't fight against Minato. Minato is not that kind of simple person. In order to prevent any big mistakes, once you have no choice, you must kill him. His eyes filled with determination, Dustless said coldly. Minato was the only person who knew that he was controlling Rin. Only by completely erasing this unstable factor, Dustless's heart would sink into the sea, and he would be able to rest easy. Otsutsuki Haruo hesitated, nodded, and rushed in the direction of Uchiha Obito. Chapter 133. The reason why Dustless let Namikaze's Minato live until now was really for the sake of Obito. Just like Uzumaki Nagato, it was just for the sake of killing the enemy with his own hands in the future, so that he could eliminate the demons in his heart and make Obito more loyal to him. However, if an unexpected situation happened, he could only send Namikaze's Minato to heaven. But before that, Konoha's ninjas should be attracted here. Wu Chen lowered his gaze and looked at the brightly lit village on the ground. An indifferent smile hung on the corner of his mouth, giving people a strange feeling. Suddenly, his body stopped and floated casually in the sky. Things have changed. After so many years, I didn't expect to meet again in this scene. Goodbye, Konoha. The cool night breeze blew Wu Chen's messy hair. The emotion in his eyes quickly converged and turned into a cold, killing intent. He raised his head slightly and looked at many giant mountains in the distance. Wu Chen's palm suddenly exerted force. Kakaka. Boom. Boom. The humongous mountain suddenly began to shake, and a buzzing sound was heard. The strong wave made the entire village of Konoha move slowly. Looking down, one could clearly see that the village of Konoha on the ground was also shaking. The coverage was unprecedentedly vast and infinite. What's going on with this strong vibration? It doesn't seem like an ordinary earthquake. Feeling the unusual ground shaking, Minato's face changed dramatically. At first, he thought it was just an ordinary small earthquake, but he didn't expect that as time passed, the shaking not only did not weaken, but also continued to increase. His heart was filled with uneasiness and irritation. What's going on? Damn it, this happened at this time. Rubbing his golden hair angrily, Minato was extremely distressed and gloomy. Now, Uzumaki Kushina was giving birth, and such a strange geological change happened at this time, obviously indicating that things were unusual. At the same time, all the ninjas in Konoha felt the abnormality of the vibration and walked out of the house. Looking at each other, they could see the shock in each other's eyes. It seems that something big has happened. I'm sorry, Kushina. Reluctantly looking at the barrier behind him, Namikaze Minato's face was full of regret. He sighed slightly and immediately turned to leave. Namikaze Minato was a person with a strong sense of responsibility. In his heart, the safety of the village was always the most important, and Uzumaki Kushina, who was about to give birth, was second. Minato himself was a speed-type ninja, and the golden rainbow cut through the night sky, rushing straight toward the center of Konoha at full speed, and soon disappeared. What a foolish man. Don't worry, your wife will meet you in hell soon. The void where Namikaze Minato was standing before distorted, showing a vortex shape, circle by circle, and a person wearing black clothes and a monocular mask appeared. His voice sounded extremely young, and there was a sense of transcendence in his tone, as if he had seen through the essence of the world. This was Uchiha Bido. It's really a secret place. Thanks to you, Zetsu. Looking around the secret and strange place, Abito nodded slightly, and immediately looked at the Nepenthes at his feet and praised softly. Zetsu's intelligence-gathering ability is really not to be underestimated, especially the number of white Zetsu's clones, thousands of them, almost all of the corners of the ninja world. There is little information that can't be gathered. This is a good barrier, but it doesn't have any effect on me. The corner of his mouth rose, and under the mask, Abito showed a contemptuous smile and immediately walked into the square barrier without fear. Compared to Abito, who was very careful, the other side was huge, and there was a sea of people. It seems that it's almost time to start. Dustless's indifferent eyes swept through the crowd below. Although he saw many people he knew in the past, for Dustless, who has completely sealed his heart, these people have become insignificant. After all, their positions and ideas are all different, and these friends who used to be separated are now all enemies. Ka. Pung, pung, pung. In the distance, the huge mountain collapsed due to the tremors, and countless meteorites continued to fall from the sky and mercilessly hit the ground. Staring at the collapsing mountain, Dustless suddenly raised his right arm and gently touched the broken stones with his palm, and then his right arm seemed to be full of magic power. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The lifeless boulders rose from the ground, ignoring the existence of the law of gravity, and soared into the sky, floating in the air as if they were floating. Looking around, the meteorites in the sky were big and small. Some were as big as a thumb, and some were as big as a beast, and they flew towards Dustless. This trick is really convenient. Looking up at the endless mountain rubble above his head, Dustless suddenly remembered the scene when he invaded the moon. At that time, Otsutsuki Hagoromo treated him with this jutsu and buried him alive. What goes around comes around. Today, it's your turn to enjoy. Laughing happily, Wuchen's raised hand dropped down, and the gravel mountain in the sky completely ignored gravity, fell instantly. The number was dense, and the scope was vast. It easily covered the whole village of Konoha. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Fortunately, it's a dark night. Otherwise, if it's daytime, you can clearly see the scene of thousands of meteorites pouring down like a torrential rain. It's extraordinarily spectacular and dazzling. Of course, there are some ninjas with outstanding abilities in Konoha below, especially the ninjas of the Hyuga clan and the Uchiha clan, who can see particularly clearly. Countless giant meteorites are mercilessly smashing towards them. Chapter 134. The ninjas of the Hyuga and Uchiha clans were stunned, and they looked at the meteorites in disbelief. After a while, their faces were filled with despair. Quick! Many ninjas of the Uchiha and Hyuga clans wanted to shout at the people around them to escape, but they swallowed the words that were about to come out of their mouths. With such a large range of dense attacks covering the entire Konoha, there was no way to escape. No matter where they escaped, there was only a dead end. Whoosh! Boom! Golden flashes of light streaked across the sky, effortlessly shattering the falling meteors. The words fourth-generation leader could be clearly seen on the Haori behind him. After Minato landed on the ground, he directly shouted at the crowd, "Hurry up and hide, it's best to hide in the basement." Although this was a bad idea, it was also the best one Minato could think of so far. These meteorites almost covered the entire sky of Konoha, and it was impossible to defend all of them. They could only passively take the hits. Minato, who attacked the village. Damn, what an amazing scale. An angry old voice sounded, and it was the angry Sandaime. He thought that after handing over the village to Minato, the most capable young Hokage in history, he could enjoy his old age and live the rest of his life leisurely. However, looking at the current situation, whether he could survive this catastrophe was a problem. Sandaime-sama, I'm sorry to disappoint you. I don't know who the enemy is and what technique they use to attack the village. Minato's mouth raised a self-deprecating smile, looking at the Sandame's old face with guilt. As the Hokage of the village, it's really hard to explain that he didn't even know who the enemy was after being attacked by a sneak attack. Don't worry about these trivial things. It doesn't matter who the enemy is, the key is how to take them down. Speaking of this, the Sandame's tone was completely cold, and his killing intent was revealed. He looked up at the sky. For ninjas of their level, there's almost no difference between day and night. Especially Dustless, who was wearing a mask, was still standing motionless in the sky. Obviously, he was deliberately exposing himself. Minato also stared at Dustless, and his brain cells began to speed up, thinking about Dustless's intention of attacking Konoha with such great fanfare. Boom, boom, boom. A large number of giant meteorites all hit Konoha's village, and countless houses and buildings collapsed. The ground was almost like the surface of the moon, and there were holes everywhere, big and small. This scene played out in the entire village. Bastard, bastard, bastard. We must make this bastard pay the price for attacking Konoha. His thunderous roar was like an erupting volcano, and the sound waves that spread out were like blazing heat waves. Everyone could not help but look sideways at the hysterical old man who seemed to have gone mad. It turned out to be Danzo. Sandame looked at Shimura Danzo and nodded calmly. Although this old enemy of his was always against him, his loyalty to Konoha was not to be doubted. Anyone could be sentenced to Konoha's ninja village, but not Shimura Danzo. Minato, you're the fourth Hokage. What are you standing there for? Hurry up and call the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki to kill that damn bastard. Shimura Danzo glared at Minato and said in a cold tone, if it weren't for Minato, the position of the fourth Hokage would have been his. For Shimura Danzo, who was crazy about being the fourth Hokage, it was hard for him to be nice to Minato. Danzo, it's impossible. Don't think about it. Kushina is on her due date. With a frown, the Sandame coldly reprimanded Danzo, cursing him in his heart. This old guy was decades old, and he was still trying to harm his own people. How could he bear it? So what? The man in front of us is stronger than we imagined. If we don't call the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki to deal with him, who else can be his opponent? Danzo looked at the Sandame with a sneer and said in a righteous tone, not backing down. This was not only an opportunity to get rid of the masked man in the sky, but also to get rid of Uzumaki Kushina. Uzumaki Kushina was now pregnant, and if she was forced to fight against the masked man in the sky, both of them might die of exhaustion. In the end, Shimura Danzo would push the Root clan to be his Jinchuriki, and he would have another weapon in his hand to defeat the enemy. I'm the fourth Hokage, and I will protect the village even if I have to die. The killing intent in his eyes disappeared in a flash, and Minato coldly looked at Shimura Danzo. There was no room for negotiation, and his tone was full of courage. How could he not know what Danzo was thinking? He wanted his wife to deal with the masked man. Don't even think about it. What a joke. Can your death exchange for the safety of the entire village? Too naive, Minato. Danzo mocked Minato. Although he was influenced by Minato's courage, he couldn't shake his plan. Enough, Danzo. The enemy is right in front of you. Even if you want to play tricks, you should stop. In the end, he couldn't suppress the anger in his heart. The Sandame stared at Shimura Danzo angrily. His blood-red eyes were filled with cold light. He was very annoyed. Now that the enemy was at their doorstep, whether Konoha could survive or not was a problem. Chakra was surging in his body, and the Sandame was obviously showing his determination and position. I hope you don't regret this, Sarutobi. Feeling the Sandame's killing intent, Shimura Danzo's face was livid. He fiercely looked at the silent Minato, and angrily looked at the masked man in the sky, Dustless. Chapter 135. The third Hokage's strong intervention cooled down the internal strife, and they began to turn their attention to the masked man in the sky, Dustless. What is this guy's purpose? It wasn't just Minato and Sandame who were puzzled. Even Shimura Danzo was very puzzled. Everything had to be done with a motive. Why would Dustless be so straightforward? Even an idiot wouldn't believe it. Minato's thoughts were running wild, and he was distressed. However, Dustless in the sky didn't care what these people were thinking. He raised his hand, and the earth shook. Kakaka, under the astonished gaze of Konoha's shinobi, countless meteorites once again gathered in the sky, densely packed like ants, covering the entire sky. Sarutobi, what else do you have to say? Immediately release the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki. Seeing this, Shimura Danzo looked at the third Hokage with a pale face. He had an impulse to go crazy, and he couldn't wait to put the third Hokage on the ground and beat him violently. With such a terrifying range, there was no way to deal with it other than releasing the Kyuubi. Yes, this guy wants the Kyuubi. Shimura Danzo's words made Minato's mind flash, and he suddenly remembered the Kyuubi, the strongest bijou. For ordinary people, the Kyuubi is the embodiment of disaster, but for people like Dustless, the Kyuubi is a delicious cake. Minato, are you sure? Hearing that the masked man, Dustless, wanted the Kyuubi, the third Hokage's heart fell to the bottom of the valley. His eyes were gloomy as he looked at the thin figure in the sky, and his muddy old eyes showed a trace of understanding. Minato, go support Kushina. This may be a trick to lure the tiger away from the mountain. The third Hokage roared anxiously, and his body was overflowing with murderous intent. He said coldly, from the beginning, he wanted the Kyuubi. So what? Dustless, who was floating in the sky, smiled indifferently. He wasn't worried about Obito's success in capturing the Kyuubi, because that kid wasn't a good person. He wouldn't be merciful just because Uzumaki Kushina was his master's wife. Today, Obito was more ruthless than anyone. But I'm the fourth Hokage. Shut up. The safety of the Kyuubi is above everything else and the foundation of the village. Leave this kid to me. Looking at the hesitant Minato, Sandaime Hokage said with dissatisfaction, the worst and best problem of this kid is that he has too much responsibility, and Namake's Minato wouldn't be of any use here. I understand, Sandaime-sama. Minato was not an indecisive person. After struggling for a while, he rushed in the direction of Kushina. As the Sandaime said, the Kyuubi was the foundation of Konoha's foothold. Without it, Konoha would be a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. Sandaime Hokage, you can't compete with me. The conversation between Sandaime Hokage and Namake's Minato was naturally heard by Wuchin, and he shook his head helplessly. He is both the Tensigen and Rinnegan, plus the glinting fruit, which can ignore most physical attacks in the world. If he lost to an old man like Sandaime Hokage, he should have fallen many years ago. Dustless, with his strong vision, clearly saw Minato leaving, and he was too lazy to stop him. Anyway, Otsutsuki Hagoromo was watching Obito, and if something unexpected happened, he would follow Dustless's orders and directly kill Minato. Sarutobi, are you crazy? Watching Minato leave, Shimura Danzo's mouth twitched fiercely, and his old face turned black as he glared at the third. Minato was the most powerful of the three. Now that he left, it meant that the only people left to face the masked man would be Shimura Danzo and the third. Whoosh, 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 a dense meteorite rain slammed down from the sky, thousands of them, overwhelming everyone. Once again, all of them roared down, mercilessly falling towards Konoha's ninjas on the ground. Boom, boom, boom. Although many of the meteorites were destroyed by Konoha's ninjas, the scale of the meteorites was too large, and there was not enough manpower to completely clean them up. Many of Konoha's ninjas were smashed into pieces. The endless smell of blood filled the void, and because it was too strong, it didn't dissipate for a long time. Looking at Konoha, although many ordinary people escaped from the battlefield, there were still many who were mercilessly smashed into pieces. Bastard! Seeing this tragic scene, Shimura Danzo shouted loudly, and his eyes were sunken, and his eyeballs were much larger than usual, as if they were about to burst. It was extremely terrifying. I can only use that jutsu. I hope the two Sama will forgive me. Looking at Konoha's hell on earth, the 3RD's face was also extremely ugly. Soon, his sad old face was filled with determination and murderous intent. He stared at Dustless, and the murderous intent in his eyes raged like a tide. Such a deep-blood feud must be paid back. The Sandaime Hokage gives off a very gentle feeling, like a kind and benevolent grandpa next door. But before that, there must be a premise, and that is, the other party must not be an enemy. In the face of an enemy, the third will completely take off his mask of kindness and show his violent side as the Hokage. Is it possible that, hearing this, Shimura Danzo's heart sank? He naturally knew about the so-called jutsu, and it can also be said that the first and second Hokage left behind another precious treasure for Konoha besides the Kyuubi. In this case, we should be able to defeat the masked man. Seeing the third completely take off his mask of kindness at this moment, Shimura Danzo breathed a sigh of relief. His heart that was crushed by the masked man, Dustless finally regained some confidence. Crack! 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 The ground suddenly cracked open, and 2 aged coffins were flipped out of the loose soil. Chapter 136. The smell of decay wafted out from the pitch-black coffins. Unfortunately, the 2 coffins were still as good as new. It was obvious that they had been preserved by some kind of special secret technique. It turned out to be the Edo Tensei. It should be the first Hokage, Senju Hashirama. As for the second coffin, it should be his younger brother, the second Hokage, Senju Tobirama. Wu Chen's eyes were calm from beginning to end. He lived in Konoha for a few years and knew that Konoha left these corpses for a rainy day in the future. The inventor of the Edo Tensei, Tobirama, hoped to preserve the strength of Konoha with this technique, so that one day in the future, when Konoha encountered a calamity, they could be awakened again to help Konoha escape. A mere dead person actually came out to make a fool of himself. Well, let me see how peerless the god of ninja, Hashirama Senju, is. Dustless's mouth under the mask curled into a smile, and then his body began to slowly fall from the sky and landed on the ground a few hundred feet away from the Hokage. What a strong vitality. Dustless's right eye suddenly turned blue, and the scene in the coffin was very clear. He could clearly see the majestic vitality contained in Hashirama's body, even if he was dead. As for Tobirama, he was no different from an ordinary person. Well, it saved me a lot of effort. Dustless's eyes became cold. He originally wanted to go to Hashirama after this sneak attack on Konoha, so that he could take away his Senjutsu chakra, but now it seems that it was unnecessary. He can take away everything from Hashirama. On the other side, Uchiha Obito easily invaded the barrier and killed all the ninjas who were guarding the barrier around him. Hate your miserable life, Uzumaki Kushina. Who told you to marry that stupid man, Minato? All of this is your own fault. Staring at Uzumaki Kushina, Uchiha Obito walked over with light steps. He looked coldly at Uzumaki Kushina's sweat-stained face, and his face was cold. Next to Uzumaki Kushina was a newborn baby in a cradle. Who are you? Struggling to open her eyes, Kushina looked at Obito, who was wearing a mask, and only one of his eyes was exposed. She asked weakly. At the same time, her sleepy eyes swept around. You actually killed him. Kushina glared at the masked Obito and used all her strength to prop herself up. However, because she had just given birth, she was exhausted and fell down again. It doesn't matter who I am. In any case, the 9 tails in your body will break out of its cage soon. In the distance, Otsutsuki Hagoromo quietly looked at the scene in front of him and couldn't help but shake his head, sighing that Dustless made Obito suffer too much. Letting Rin die in the hands of Minato was too much of a blow to Obito, causing him to be so obsessed with the Minato couple. If it weren't for Dustless's interference, Obito wouldn't have been so crazy. Ayo, ayo, ayo. A deafening roar suddenly resounded through the sky, and an evil feeling pressed on everyone's heart. Even from a few kilometers away, they could feel the doomsday-like panic. He raised his head and saw a huge orange fox with 9 tails. It was swaying its 9 thick tails. If one were to be swept by the scarlet eyes of the killer, one would feel as if one's soul would crumble. There was no need for anything else. Just his incomparably calm gaze was enough to scare people to death. A mere beast dares to be so unscrupulous. Coming out of the delivery room where Uzumaki Kushina gave birth, Obito looked indifferently at the Kyuubi raging in the sky, and the 3-tomo Sharingan on his mask showed contempt. "I'll put a collar on you now." Staring at the evil eyes of the Kyuubi, Obito disdainfully curled his lips, and then his eyes suddenly widened. Ayo, Ayo! The Kyuubi, who was planning to celebrate breaking out of the prison, was suddenly trapped in Konoha for decades. His blood-red eyes became even redder and more evil. And just as he was about to erupt his power and turn Konoha upside down, his scarlet eyes turned into 3-tomo Sharingan, and his whole body became stiff. His angry expression also became sluggish, obviously under Obito's control. Good eye power, but it's really different from him. Staring at the Kyuubi who had calmed down, Otsutsuki Hagoromo nodded indifferently. There was a difference between this eye power and Dustless's. "Let's go, Zetsu." Glancing at Zetsu, who was still outside the barrier, Obito said indifferently, and his body suddenly began to fade and then quickly disappeared. As for Uzumaki Kushina's life and death, he didn't need to care. Even if the vitality of the Uzumaki clan is strong and the amount of chakra is also strong, after the tailed beast is extracted, only death awaits. This is an iron law that hasn't changed for thousands of years. Seeing Obito leave, Zetsu no longer stayed, and his body began to slowly sink into the ground, and then disappeared. However, Black Zetsu glanced at the place where Otsutsuki was hiding. That guy is really not simple, worthy of Kagaya's will. Noticing that Zetsu and Obito had left, Otsutsuki Hagoromo gracefully walked out of the jungle. She originally thought that Dustless was deliberately fooling her, but he just wanted to borrow her strength. Now it seems that what Dustless said was true. Black Zetsu was definitely not as simple as he looked. The legendary goddess of Uno. No wonder Dustless trained himself so hard. Otsutsuki's red lips slightly pouted, and only then did Otsutsuki understand why Dustless desperately increased his strength. As the former head of the Otsutsuki clan, she knew far more about Kagaya than Dustless. To put it bluntly, Otsutsuki Kagaya was the origin of all things in the world, the original owner of chakra, the god of creation, the ultimate existence of immortality. Chapter 137. Wuchen stared at the two black coffins with endless decay. Tensigen could clearly see the scene inside the black coffins. He could clearly see that Hashirama's body was extremely well preserved, almost no different from when he was alive. He was like a living dead who had lost his breath and was about to fall asleep. As expected of the legendary god of ninja, Hashirama, you really can't be underestimated. After a while, Dustless calmly retracted his gaze. Although he verbally called Hashirama the god of ninja, anyone could hear how contemptuous and even disdainful his tone was. For the former Dustless, Hashirama was an existence that he could only look up to. But for the current him, Hashirama was just a drop in the ocean, an insignificant passerby in the long river of life. "Good boy, you're really bold." Shimura Danzo's mouth twitched fiercely as he looked at Dustless with a gloomy expression. He thought that Dustless didn't know that the person in the coffin was Hashirama, but now it seems that he thought too much. With the roar of the third Hokage, chakra erupted from his body, and when he looked up, he could clearly see that the figure in the coffin was moving. Two figures stood up like ghosts. "It's really a long time since I've had fresh air. This bastard, who did this?" The angry voice resounded through the sky, as if an ancient creature had awakened, accompanied by the dark blue chakra's restlessness. The burst of chakra directly shook the ground, and many cracks appeared. The two coffins were impressively turned into ruins, and the person who was angry was the first Hokage, also known as the god of ninja, Hashirama Senju. "Big brother, don't use chakra." The second Hokage, who was also Edo Tensei, frowned and scolded. At the same time, he looked at the tragic situation of Konoha from the corner of his eyes, and his brows suddenly became gloomy, and his murderous intent erupted uncontrollably. Konoha village was managed by Hashirama and Tobirama. They even sacrificed their lives for it. Now it was destroyed like hell. How could the two brothers not be angry? There's no need to look. The person who slaughtered Konoha is, before Dustless could finish his sentence, the silver-white cold light in front of him whistled. The sharp cold light reflected a killing intent that made people unable to open their eyes. It was as if they opened their eyes, they would be blinded by the cold light. As expected of the second Hokage, famous for his speed, Dustless turned his head, revealing half of his face, and praised without hesitation. Night Aim's speed was really fast, and the human eye simply couldn't capture his movement. It was as if he used a space ninjutsu to fly over. Penetrated? Looking back at Dustless's back, Tobirama frowned slightly, and Edo Tensei's face was full of doubt. He was sure that his Tachi had passed through Dustless's body. Dustless's body felt as if it had turned illusory in an instant. The Uchiha clan's flame fan? Isn't that Madara's weapon? Where did he get it? Hashirama looked at the flame fan behind Dustless with interest. As an old enemy of Madara, he certainly knew that it was Madara's weapon. This was given to me by Uchiha Madara. Looking at Hashirama, Dustless was quite teasing. Nonsense. Uchiha Madara has been dead for decades. This kid must have stolen it. Shimura Danzo, who had been unhappy with Dustless for a long time, immediately frowned. When Madara and Hashirama fought, he and the third Hokage became their apprentices, so naturally, they knew what happened. Not long after the battle, Hashirama also died. In terms of time, it was impossible for Madara to give the flame fan to Dustless. Brother, this kid's ability seems a bit strange. He seems to be able to turn illusory. His eyes narrowed slightly, staring at Dustless with a spiral mask. Tobirama was surprised. It doesn't matter where Dustless's flame fan came from. As long as they capture him, the truth will naturally come to light. Tobirama carefully looked at Dustless with a mask, and his eyes became cold. Dustless destroyed Konoha, and he must pay with his blood. I know. Hashirama naturally saw the difference in Dustless, but he didn't care too much. There were many kinds of ninjutsu in the world, and there were all kinds of them. The only thing that made Hashirama feel strange was that Dustless seemed to have a special power that resonated with him. Let's test him first. Hashirama, who couldn't find the reason, no longer entangled, he printed with both hands, and the majestic chakra broke out of his body, and the ground with Hashirama, as the center began to tremble slightly, and the tremors continued to spread wildly. Would release, world of trees. Boom! The ground suddenly cracked, and countless thick trees emerged from the depths of the ground. The number was dense and endless, and the surrounding environment instantly turned into an endless green jungle. Amazing range. Looking at the green jungle that seemed to swallow the whole world, Dustless nodded slightly, and his eyes once again fell on Hashirama, and he restored his eternal calmness. Whoosh! Countless green vines emerged from under his feet, and they rose sharply along Dustless's legs, and soon Dustless was firmly tied. Say, who are you, and what is your purpose? Hashirama's voice stopped abruptly, and he saw Dustless's body suddenly swept a swallowing force, and the vines that were still full of vitality instantly fell to the ground like dead branches. This guy, seeing this, Hashirama's face sank, and he looked at Dustless with a dignified expression. He knew that Dustless swallowed all the chakra in the wood release. Chapter 138. Tobirama stared at the dead trees on the ground, and his pupils narrowed slightly. After feeling it carefully, his face changed slightly. Naturally, he knew how powerful it was. Only Mokutan absorbed other people's chakra. This was the first time that Mokutan was absorbed by the opponent's jutsu. This guy is weird, Hashirama said cautiously. Absorbing chakra was not something that anyone could do, especially the masked man in front of him. It was obvious that he used his own strength to easily absorb Mokutan in an instant. Mokutan, flower tree world, descends. Buzz, as Hashirama's voice fell. The thick trees in the forest began to surge rapidly, and many thick tree branches burst out of huge pink buds. Suddenly, the pink buds bloomed, and yellow smoke floated out. As long as you breathe it in, you can feel a sense of powerlessness spread all over your body in an instant. This kind of jutsu is useless to me, Hashirama. His body seemed to ignore the gravity. Wu-chun flew to the sky lightly. Endless repulsive force floated out from his body. The tyrannical air wave roared out as if it was crushing dry weeds. It was unstoppable. Super Shinra Tensei. As Dustless's voice fell, the endless green forest on the ground burst open, setting off yellow smoke all over the sky. The visibility was less than 10 feet, and all the pollen that seeped out of Mokutan was blown to the sky. Hashirama didn't even let out a roar, and his whole body was swallowed by the burst of air, and his body was directly crushed into nothingness. Like evaporating water, he disappeared in an instant. This is the biggest advantage of Edo Tensei. Immortal body, infinite chakra. Dustless above the sky stared at Hashirama, who recovered his body and said indifferently. There was no worry in his tone, but he was full of confidence. The so-called invincible body is actually full of mistakes. It's not that there is no way to restrain it. For Dustless, who has Rinnegan and Tensegan at the same time, it's really simple. It really is the legendary Rinnegan. Only Rinnegan can absorb ninjutsu and float in the air without any external force. Under the astonished gaze of Hashirama and Tobarama, Wu-chun's left eye turned purple, and the mysterious black lines surged open Rinnegan. What was intriguing was that there were 6 clear black tomo hanging on it. Looks like we're in trouble. This kid should be able to use that technique. Tobarama stood beside Hashirama with Itachi in his hand. His face was full of caution. The advantage of Edo Tensei was no longer there. That's right, it's the Rinnegan without a doubt. He should be able to use Yin-Yang escape. Be careful of Tobarama. If you get hit by that technique, even the Edo Tensei won't be able to recover. Hashirama said cautiously. The advantage of Edo Tensei was no longer there, and the consequences of being contaminated by Yin-Yang release was self-evident. Since it is proven that he has the Rinnegan, it seems that ordinary techniques won't work on him. Then Hashirama printed with both hands, and a vast and majestic chakra floated out of Hashirama's body. This unprecedented chakra was much more terrifying than the Kyuubi. Sage method. Looking up, Hashirama closed his eyes slightly, and there were many red marks on both sides of his eyes. His whole body was filled with a huge natural chakra. Bright God Gate. Red logs fell from the sky, and the shadows covered the sky. Looking up, the number was quite large, and the range was not small. It seemed that they wanted to completely crush Dustless. This should be able to subdue him. Looking at Dustless floating in the sky, Tobarama said with uncertainty. To be honest, he didn't believe it himself. The Rinnegan was above the other 2 dojutsu. If it was so easy to kill it, the reputation of the Rinnegan wouldn't be so bad. How could the legendary Rinnegan, which could create and destroy the world, be so weak? It's worthy of being a technique that can even bind the Jubi. Looking up at the red logs in the sky, Dustless smiled faintly, and in the Rinnegan in his left eye suddenly floated out ripples, and a strong repulsive force was ejected again. Bang, bang, bang. The cylindrical rosewood that wanted to kill Dustless was suddenly bounced back by this strong repulsive force. Not to mention killing Dustless, it was extremely difficult to even touch him. Attack and defense in one. Tobarama frowned slightly when he saw this. This technique gave him a feeling that it was quite troublesome. Whether it was attack or defense, it was perfect and there was no loophole at all. It's my turn. Dustless in the sky suddenly disappeared, and only the golden straight light poured down and went straight toward Hashirama and Tobarama. The thick beam of light emitted a terrifying sharpness that could cut through all things. Anyone who came into contact with it would die. Mokutan, Jutsu. The skies suddenly turned dark, and the wooden shield of the fanged ghost face surrounded Hashirama and Tobirama to defend against the terrifying impact of Dustless. According to Dustless's appearance, the probability of him not using Inyang release was 0. Edo Tensei would definitely be finished after being hit by Inyang release. There was no possibility of recovery, so he had to make a defensive countermeasure. It seems that this guy should be coming for the QB. Tobirama, who was good at using his brain, analyzed and immediately said the answer to Dustless's attack on Konoha. There was nothing in Konoha that could attract Dustless's attention except for the QB. Indeed, Hashirama also nodded in agreement. Although he didn't know what Dustless wanted to do with the QB, there was no doubt that he was coming for the QB. Puchi. The crackling sound of wood cracking resounded, and the golden light illuminated the dark world. Suddenly looking up, it was Dustless who had directly smashed Senju Hashirama's wood-release defense. This guy is really evildoer. The corner of his mouth twitched fiercely, and Tobirama was speechless. This technique once defended against Uchiha Madara. Chapter 139. While Dustless and Hashirama were fighting, Obito wasn't idle either. After taming the QB, he originally planned to destroy Konoha, but he found out that Konoha was already covered by a meteorite rain. Although Konoha was completely destroyed by Dustless, there were still many fish that escaped the net, such as these two big fish in front of him. The Sandaime Hokage and Shimura Danzo of Root. That's strange. Obito faintly looked at the two old men in front of him, and his eyes under the mask were cautious. If he underestimated these two people because they were over 100 years old, the end will definitely be tragic. After all, Sarutobi and Shimura Danzo were once the disciples of Hashirama and Tobirama. Are you an accomplice of that masked man? And it seems that you have already succeeded. Looking at Obito's one-eyed mask, the Sandaime said in a deep voice. The masked man he was talking about was naturally Dustless, and at the same time, he was afraid that Uzumaki Kushina's bijou might have already been taken away. Especially the evil chakra that appeared just now. It was definitely a bijou's. You turn out to be from the Uchiha clan. Your clan really isn't a good thing. Shimura Danzo fiercely stared at Obito's one-eyed mask, and he could clearly see the 3 Tomo Sharingan, which confirmed Obito's identity as an Uchiha. That group of traitors should have been destroyed long ago. Thinking of Konoha's heavy losses, Shimura Danzo was furious. Originally, after the Shinobi War, Konoha should have been the strongest shinobi village, far more powerful than the other 4 shinobi villages. But now, after these 2 masked men's torment, I'm afraid they'll fall to the bottom. They are indeed a dangerous clan. The Sandaime also agreed with Shimura Danzo's point of view, and he felt estranged from the Uchiha clan. Only the Uchiha can control the QB. Although Konoha has been tossed around by that guy, I'll let you enjoy the power of the QB. Under his mask, Obito had a cold smile on his face. He didn't have a good impression of Konoha's ninjas, and he couldn't wait for them to die. These 2 old men were the former Hokage, and the other was the leader of Root. There was no doubt that they were powerful figures. If they die, Konoha might really fall. Summoning technique. 9 tails. Ow ow. Bang bang bang. Every time the 9-tailed beast appeared, it was accompanied by a strong geological change. Its huge body crushed the surface of the earth, and its deafening roar mixed with the chakra of calamity spread out. It was like a thunderclap that resounded through the sky, causing the entire night sky to tremble. Dustless, who was fighting Hashirama and Tobirama, was also stunned. Idiot! Looking at the QB's ferocious appearance in the distance, Dustless's face was livid. He originally thought that after taking the QB, he would run away, because Konoha was completely destroyed by him. Next, he should take the QB and run away. There was no need to fight with Konoha to the death. Let's catch the QB first. Thinking of this, Dustless immediately made a decision in his heart. His eyes were filled with a cold light, and his killing intent burst out like a tide. He turned into a thick beam of light and flew straight toward Abito. In just a blink of an eye, he arrived at Abito's side. The mission of capturing the QB has been completed. There is no need to waste time on it. Looking at the QB's 3-tomo Sharingan, Dustless faintly said to Abito. His tone was full of dissatisfaction, and then looking deeply at Abito, Dustless said, "There's no need to show off. Don't forget the essence of our plan. There is no need to waste time on Konoha's ninjas." Abito was stunned when he heard this, and his 3-tomo Sharingan became a little clearer. He nodded slightly. Indeed, there was no need to waste time on Konoha's people. 4 Red Yang Formation. Just as Uchiha Abito and Wuchen were about to leave, a fiery red square-shaped barrier suddenly appeared, tightly wrapping around Wuchen, Uchiha Abito, and the Kyuubi. There is a road to heaven, but you don't take it. There is no door to hell, but you throw yourself into it. Staring at the fiery red barrier that suddenly appeared, Dustless's face was ugly. He originally wanted to give face to Konoha's ninja village, but he didn't expect this group of stubborn old people to be so stupid. The power of the 4 Red Yang Formation is beyond doubt. It requires 4 Hokages to release a powerful barrier. Hashirama, Tobirama, and the Sandame, plus the Yandame, who just arrived, just made 4 people. You won't go to hell with 4 people. I will fulfill your wish. With a cruel sneer on his face, Dustless's pupils suddenly enlarged, and a cold and sharp light shot out his eyes. His aura continued to rise, and the golden energy fluctuations swept up, and the materialized chakra gushed out. You think such a weak barrier can restrict my actions? You are too naive. Looking at the 4 Hokage outside the enchantment, Wu Chun grinned. Well, since I defeated that kid and got everything he had, I haven't used this technique. Today, I'll let you see it. Kinsusinu. Boom. Boom. The golden high-density chakra instantly rose to a height of 100 meters, and the mighty golden giant covered the sky. The brilliant afterglow sprinkled the endless void, and the dark night became as bright as day. The 100-meter-tall giant had 4 arms and 2 heads, and 2 slender katanas on its waist. Even if it hasn't been drawn, one can feel the power of the katana. This is the ultimate Kinsusinu, so he is from the Uchiha clan. Looking cautiously at the golden giant covering the sky, Hashirama's heart sank. From the height of Kinsusinu's power, Dustless's eye power has surpassed Madara's. Chapter 140. The 100-meter-tall golden giant crushed the sky. Its mountain-like body stood between the heavens and the earth, and it was extremely domineering. Its ancient aura swept through the heavens and the earth, and its body had traces of time. Its scarlet eyes pulsed with hellish demonic light, and its heavy armor gave people the feeling that it had been on the battlefield for a long time. That invincible momentum made people deeply moved, and they couldn't help but sigh that such a giant could only be matched by a god. This guy's Kinsusinu is really big, and it hasn't merged with the Kyuubi yet. Otherwise, its size should be bigger. Hashirama muttered to himself, and he couldn't help but compare Madara and Dustless in the Valley of the End. Suddenly, he felt that Madara's Kinsusinu was a mature version. Hashirama's heart felt extremely subtle, and to be specific, it was quite a feeling of clearing the clouds and seeing the blue sky. The golden Kinsusinu in front of him was a veritable ultimate version. As for Madara's Kinsusinu, it was just a fake. A new generation replaces the old, and even if we are resurrected, we are not as good as these young people. Looking at the tall and extraordinary Kinsusinu, Hashirama's face was complicated, and his tone was unprecedentedly melancholy. It was hard to imagine that the usually optimistic Hashirama had such a feeling of loneliness. It was not flattery, although Dustless was wearing a mask to cover his face. From his figure and figure, Dustless was now only in his 20s, and his future potential was almost unlimited. Brother, now is not the time for you to be secretly sad. Tobirama stared at Hashirama, and then said bitterly. Looking at Dustless's 100-meter-tall Kinsusinu, His heart was very depressed, and his heart was uncontrollably filled with a sense of insignificance, and the more he deliberately avoided, the more intense it was. This kind of enchantment can't do anything to me. Staring at the red enchantment in front of him, Dustless smiled contemptuously. Kinsusinu also pulled out the tachi in his hand. The surface of the tachi was not very sharp, but it was like an unforged scrap sword, and the blade was extremely thick. However, even so, it gave others a feeling that it was as easy as crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. It was like a heavy sword without a sharp edge, and it gave off a feeling of great ingenuity. Suddenly, a straight ray of light appeared in the sky, and the dark sky was particularly conspicuous, and the piercing light seemed to cut the supreme sky. Whoosh! The golden katana came crashing down, easily leaving a long and narrow scar on the fiery red barrier. Due to the great strength, the airwaves from the front end of the katana directly collapsed a few mountains in the distance. What a terrifying strength! Seeing this, Senju Hashirama and the other Hokage's complexion slightly changed, and they were stunned. Obviously, they were also shocked by the power of Dustless's ultimate Susanoo. Kacha! Kinsusanu's huge fist broke the enchantment, and he walked out of the collapsed enchantment. Because of his huge body, the ground trembled as Kinsusanu walked. All of you back off. If you stay here, you'll only be a burden to me. Taking a deep breath, Hashirama said sternly, "As the saying goes, there is strength in numbers, but there is also a limit. The other three Hokage not only can't do anything, but they may also need his help. Let's go and get the Kyuubi back first." Hashirama nodded, and then looked at the orange monster, and his eyes were cold. Maybe the three of them together are not Dustless's opponent, but he is still confident in attacking Obito. The third Hokage and Minato looked at each other and rushed in the direction of the Kyuubi. "You want to take the Kyuubi back? How can I let you do that?" Seeing Tobirama and the other two besieging the Kyuubi, Wu Chen's mouth suddenly raised into a sarcastic smile, and the chakra in his body began to surge violently again. Summoning Jutsu, Geto Mazo, Kacha, the giant broke out of the ground and jumped out of the depths of the ground. Its body, which weighed dozens of tons, fell heavily on the ground, splashing a few feet of dust. Even dustless inside, Kinsusinu trembled fiercely. The 9 eyes were fierce, and its whole body was filled with the smell of ancient decay, as if it had come through time, from the world of thousands of years ago to the present world. "Now take back the Kyuubi and control the Geto Mazo." The other half of Obito's body was composed of Hashirama's chakra, so he also had the ability to control the Geto Mazo, but he was not as skilled as Dustless. "No problem." Obito nodded. Although it was a bit early to collect the bijou, now was the best time to capture the Kyuubi, and naturally, he couldn't let it go. "Get in here." He jumped on top of the Geto Mazo's head, and the Geto Mazo opened its big mouth full of fangs, and several thick purple chains shot out of its throat, hooking the Kyuubi's head and pulling it over. As if feeling the strong binding of the chains, the Kyuubi suddenly felt a sense of fear that he had never felt before. Under Obito's control, the Kyuubi began to instinctively resist the Geto Mazo's chains. The Kyuubi's strong resistance made a long trench on the ground. Although the order of injecting the bijou into the Geto Mazo starts with the Ichibi, there's no problem with pulling the bijou in, but the problem, Obito muttered to himself. Injecting the bijou into the Geto Mazo must start with the Ichibi. Otherwise, the balance would be broken. However, there was no bijou in the Geto Mazo, so it shouldn't affect the balance, and if he couldn't, he could pull the Kyuubi out of the Geto Mazo. Rasengan. A yellow light suddenly appeared in front of Obito's eyes, and it was Minato with a cold face. The chakra in his right hand also blasted towards Obito's mask. "Idiot!" The masked Uchiha Obito smiled contemptuously as he looked at the incoming energy ball without fear. Chapter 141. Looking at the incoming Rasengan without fear, Abito stood in the same place. His body was motionless like a sculpture, letting the giant Rasengan hit his face. It's useless. After saying that, Abito closed his eyes leisurely, turning a deaf ear to the oncoming Minato. The moment he caught Minato's sneak attack, he immediately activated his Sharingan's Kamui ability, turning his body into nothingness. On the other side, the atmosphere was even more solemn and quiet, and the strongest battle was about to begin. It's amazing. I didn't expect the Uchiha family to have a genius like you. Looking at Dustless standing on the head of Susanoo, Hashirama sincerely admired him. Although Dustless's face was hidden behind a mask, he could still see that Dustless was definitely not more than 20 years old. But Hashirama's tone suddenly became low, and he looked at Dustless with uncertainty. He seemed to be thinking of the past, and his thoughts were lost in his memories. After a while, Hashirama recovered, and his killing intent burst out like a tide. A majestic chakra was slowly brewing behind him, and several white-headed Buddhas with giant arms were faintly visible. Even the ultimate body, Susanoo, Dustless, was stunned. It's a pity that you fell into the devil's path at such a young age, Senjita. Thousands of hands. As Hashirama's voice fell, several white-headed Buddhas with giant arms suddenly formed behind him, and the huge range was much larger than Dustless's, and it was heading toward Dustless. No wonder Uchiha Madara lost to Hashirama. Dustless was also secretly shocked. Looking around, he saw numerous Buddhas with thick arms rushing toward him, and the ground was shaking slightly. The momentum was monstrous. Hashirama stood on the head of the Buddhas and rushed toward Dustless's ultimate body, Susanoo. I can see that you and Madara are the same kind of people. In order to pursue power, you will do anything, and you will turn a deaf ear to the pain of others. Hashirama's eyes on the head of the Buddha became colder, and his killing intent became more and more thorough. There were signs of condensing into ice. He saw the figure of Uchiha Madara in the past from Wuchen. His mentality was even crazier than Madara's. Wuchen's eyes were stronger than Madara's. Every man for himself, and the devil takes the hindmost. Hearing this, Wuchen sneered at Hashirama. If it wasn't for this guy's Virgin Mary mentality, listening to Madara's advice, maybe Konoha would have unified the world, and there wouldn't be such a large-scale war. It seems that you are really hopeless. Hashirama's expression became colder, and even the surface of his skin was covered with crystal frost. His momentum quickly rose to the limit, and his eyes suddenly shot out a burst of cold light. Top of the Buddha. Whoosh! The giant arms that were tightly connected to each other suddenly poured out in torrents. The dense and huge fists were innumerable, as numerous as the sand in the Ganges, making it impossible to see exactly how many there were. In general, Dustless was sure of one thing, and that was that these dense fists were extremely powerful. A single one could easily crush a small mountain, and if a large number of them gathered together, even his ultimate body Susanoo would inevitably be torn apart. Uchiha Fire Formation. The crimson halo dyed the sky red, and the surrounding temperature instantly increased by dozens of times. Looking up, they saw the crimson flame barrier in front of Dustless's Susanoo, and the burning hot barrier replaced Susanoo's destruction. Bang, bang, bang. The powerful giant fists all mercilessly smashed on the flame barrier, and the fierce force made it constantly tremble, and countless cracks quickly spread around. Obviously, it had reached its limit. Kaka! The flame barrier finally failed to resist the destruction, and it exploded into pieces, and the hot lava fell to any corner of the sky, and the ground was burned black. The Susanoo was directly exposed to the attack of the enemy. Bang! The sound of steel buzzing sounded, and Susanoo's long sword was unsheathed, and it slashed out a strong slash, and everything in front of it was wiped out. Boom! Huge golden slashes rose from the ground, destroying the heavens and earth. Long and narrow trenches were formed in the ground, exposing the soil deep underground to the air. The rampaging golden radiance easily annihilated many of the giant arms. However, the number of giant fists was too many, and although Dustless's slash destroyed a batch, there were still countless giant fists coming, and Kinsusanu's movement was not convenient, and it directly became the target of the group attack. Bang, bang, bang. The crisp sound of bones being broken continued, and Dustless knew that Kinsusanu's defense was being peeled off by countless giant fists, and it was constantly being weakened. The Rinnegan in his left eye suddenly surged with cold light, and the black lines also rippled, and the 6 black tomo also swayed slightly. An irresistible repulsion broke out of his body, and it swept out like a wave, spreading without limit, ensuring that no existence around him would be spared. Super Shinra Tensei. The countless giant fists that were attacking the ultimate body, Kinsusanu, were suddenly crushed, and they simply disappeared completely, like water vapor in the wind. It seems that it's just so. Boom. Seeing that the huge fist flying towards him was completely destroyed, Dustless breathed a sigh of relief, as if relieved of a heavy burden. But at this time, an incomparably thick arm suddenly grabbed him, and the tyrannical strength reached the terrifying degree of several tens of thousands of June and directly punched Susanoo in the face. It was Hashirama, who was controlling the body of the giant Buddha, and when he got closer, he realized that this Hashirama was much bigger than Dustless's ultimate body, Kinsusu. Chapter 142. The great Buddha attacked with all his strength, and his fists were exceptionally ferocious, and Susanoo was forced to retreat again and again. The tyrannical strength made Susanoo constantly forced to retreat, and Dustless on top of his head was also trembling. Kacha! Looking up, Kinsusu's left shoulder was broken by brute force. Exposed to the erosion of the air, the uneven wounds looked like they were bitten by a fierce beast, very hideous. If this hits a person, Dustless took a deep breath, his eyes widened, and the horror was not hidden at all. Looking at the huge fist on Kinsusanu's shoulder, he couldn't help but feel a chill. If this hit a person, I'm afraid anyone would die. It seems that Kinsusanu can't do anything to him. Sighing, Dustless's ultimate form, Kinsusanu, was strong, but compared with the giant Buddha opposite, it was like a small child in front of a big one. There was no comparison at all. The QB with Kinsusanu was not as strong as the giant Buddha, not to mention that Dustless is now a pure Kinsusanu, and there is no QB. You have successfully angered me. Senju Hashirama. Lowering his head, Dustless looked at Hashirama with a gloomy face, and his eyes were full of murderous intent. People who anger me don't have a good end. The Tensigen in his right eye suddenly rippled. Dustless removed the ultimate form, Kinsusanu, covering his body, and a brilliant golden light flashed in his hand, full of the feeling of invincibility. I have already seen your dismembered body. As his voice fell, the golden light in his hand became even more resplendent. His cold and lonely face was filled with a ferocious look. The smell of blood drifting in the air was dense and pungent. The golden light extended without limit, turning into an endless beam of light that swept over. Golden Wheel Reincarnation Explosion. Whoosh! A sharp piercing sound rang out. Raising his head, he saw a slender golden ray of light wreaking havoc like a hurricane. It was impossible to calculate how long the ray of light was. Bastard, there's no way to hide in such a large area. Staring at the golden light coming from the side, Hashirama snorted. His face was extremely ugly. Dustless's Kinsusanu wasn't good at moving, and his technique was the same. He couldn't avoid it. The larger a creature was, the harder it was for them to move as nimbly as humans. Their body size was a disadvantage to them. Of course, there were no absolutes in this world, and there was no lack of special existences. Pucci, at a glance, the golden light pierced through the Buddha's body. The huge Buddha statue was penetrated by the golden light. In the center, one could clearly see the crack that split the statue into two. What a terrifying technique. Seeing this scene, Hashirama's face was even more serious. a technique that could defeat the most powerful technique of Mokutan, and it was so easy to defeat it. It could no longer be looked at with ordinary eyes. He looked at the golden light that whistled past him. It should be a ninjutsu that humans could not touch. Now is not the time for you to be surprised. Dustless appeared behind Hashirama like a ghost. He held a black iron rod in his hand. This was a combination of his will. It was condensed from the yin-yang release. Whoosh! The black iron rod swept out with full force, and it went straight to the back of Hashirama. Puchi! Hashirama's abdomen was immediately penetrated by the black rod, and the chakra that erupted from his body suddenly decreased. This strange black rod seemed to be able to absorb chakra, and it bound Hashirama's chakra. This Hashirama, who was already dead, naturally could not feel the so-called pain. He looked at the black iron rod that penetrated his body and felt that his chakra was restricted. His eyes flashed with understanding. Is this the yin-yang release? The body's acupuncture points are sealed. Puchi, several black iron rods entered his body. Hashirama helplessly found that, not to mention mobilizing chakra, even the minimum movement was completely sealed. The strength of his body was drained, and he could only kneel on the ground. Who are you? Not only do you have Rinnegan, but you also have Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. And you're right, I seems to be not simple. Turning his head, Hashirama questioned Dustless, who was walking over. Looking at the Tensigen in Dustless's right eye, he could not help but frown. He was sure that the dark blue eye was definitely not weaker than Rinnegan. As expected of the god of ninja, Hashirama, you can see the extraordinariness of the Tensigen at a glance. Looking at Hashirama, Dustless smiled with relief. Tensigen is the eye that only Otsutsuki Hamura, the younger brother of the Rakudo Sennin, can have. In fact, it is the same level of eye as Rinnegan, but Rinnegan is more inclined to seal, while Tensigen is more in pursuit of absolute destruction. Dustless didn't hide anything in his tone. Anyway, there was nothing to hide for a person like Hashirama who was about to die. No wonder. Remembering that the golden light just destroyed his Buddha, Hashirama was relieved. Staring at Dustless's spiral mask, he asked in a deep voice, "It seems that your origin is not simple. You have my cells in your body." In fact, Hashirama had long known that Dustless had his cells in his body, but he didn't have time to say it before the fight. Now that Dustless was so close to him, he felt it more clearly. Dustless chuckled when he heard this and replied faintly, "The god of the world wants peace, divided into yin and yang. Two forces repel each other and become one, giving birth to all things in the world." How do you know this? Hashirama heard this and immediately looked at Dustless with uncertainty. Uchiha Madara once said these words to him, but so far, he didn't understand what it meant. "You will know what I mean soon." With a cold smile on his face, Dustless stretched his hands forward and grabbed Hashirama's neck. His whole body was like a black hole absorbing Hashirama's Senjutsu chakra. Chapter 143. Hashirama looked at Dustless in confusion. He really didn't understand the meaning of these words. After Uchiha Madara said these words to him, he left Konoha without understanding it. A few years later, he started the war that destroyed Konoha. Aware that the Senjutsu chakra in his body was continuously absorbing, Hashirama wanted to resist, but the black iron rod inserted behind him couldn't make him use any power. Not to mention using ninjutsu, even standing up was extremely difficult. This is your Senjutsu chakra. There is nothing special about it. After feeling the Senjutsu chakra pouring into his body, Dustless carefully tasted it and whispered indifferently. Although the power of chakra is extremely great, for today's Dustless, it really doesn't have much use. The left eye socket suddenly swept a warm current. Dustless was slightly startled, carefully feeling the changes of the 6 Tomo Rinnegan in the eye socket. His heart suddenly became happy. This unprecedented throbbing. It seems that the Rinnegan is going to evolve again. Closing his eyes slightly, Wu Chan murmured to himself in a low voice. The warm flow that contained a huge amount of vitality flowed into the left eye socket, just like a gentle gaze moistening the Rinnegan. Evolution? Hashirama naturally heard Dustless's words. He didn't hear that the Rinnegan could evolve. He just stared at Dustless's left eye. The Rinnegan can evolve, but then again, his Rinnegan still has those black tomo. Hashirama suddenly realized that Dustless's Rinnegan still had 6 clearly visible black tomo hanging on the black coil, extraordinarily mysterious and simple, attracting his attention. Under Hashirama's incredible gaze, the 6 tomo in Dustless's left eye suddenly became 7 tomo. How is this possible? The shock in Hashirama's heart was self-evident. He looked at the newly born black tomo in disbelief, and then remembered what Wuchen had just said. His heart suddenly flashed, and he felt like he had cleared the clouds and looked at the sky. Is it possible that Hashirama's pupils dilated? Even if he was already a dead person, he couldn't help but break out in cold sweat, and his heart was cold. Yes, as you think, the combination of the Uchiha and Senju is the only way to awaken the Rinnegan. The reason why Madara is so obsessed with you is because he saw the contents of the Uchiha's Naka tombstone about the Rinnegan. The cold voice was like a shot in the heart, making Hashirama's heart jump. All the doubts in the past now suddenly realized that something was wrong. Hashirama's face was gloomy, his eyebrows were sometimes murderous, and sometimes he was unusually frightened. His face was full of fear. Uchiha got the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan and saw the content of the Rinnegan, and the way is to combine the power of Hashirama and the power of the Uchiha. Just like what I just said to you, 2 different forces working together can get true happiness. Dustless said the tomo in his eyes didn't stop decreasing at this moment. There were already 8 tomo, and there was still luster flowing in his eyes, constantly moistening the frame. Apparently, it didn't stop evolving. That is to say, that guy also opened the Rinnegan. Hashirama said gloomily he didn't expect that the birth of the Rinnegan was the combination of the power of the 2 clans. In all likelihood, Uchiha Madara also opened the Rinnegan. Who knows? Anyway, he's dead. Hearing this, Dustless smiled softly and gave an ambiguous answer. Uchiha Madara has become a thing of the past. Just like the current Hashirama, there is no stage for them to play in the future. What's your purpose? And that summoned beast. Looking at the masked Uchiha Obito in the distance, Hashirama asked in a deep voice. He also felt the palpitating power from the decaying giant. My purpose, of course, is to modify the poor work of the 6-Path Sage. Uchiha Madara despised the world created by the 6-Path Sage, and so did Dustless, but their purposes were fundamentally different. Uchiha Madara wanted to become the Jubi's Jinchuriki and release infinite Tsukuyomi to the world, while Dustless just wanted to take away everything from Otsutsuki Kagaya. Therefore, they could be considered as allies, even if it was only temporary. After swallowing the Jubi, I will become the only immortal existence, and reclaim the chakra scattered all over the world, and I will create a new world. Staring at the battlefield in the distance, Dustless couldn't help but be speechless. Uchiha Obito was defeated again and again. Facing the attack of the 3 Hokage, he was indeed pale and powerless now. Jubi? Hashirama looked at Dustless in puzzlement. It was the first time he heard this word in his life. In his impression, there were only 9-tailed beasts from the Ichibi to the 9-tailed, but there was no Jubi. The collection of the 9-tailed beasts is the Jubi, and now the Gedomazo is the empty shell of the Jubi. Inject the 9-tailed beasts into it, and the Jubi will be resurrected again. And I will become the new master of the Jubi, of course, not like the so-called Jinchuriki, but completely take the Jubi's chakra for my own use. Dustless said, and at the same time, the Rinnegan in his left I changed again, and on the 3 dark lines, a total of 9 black tomo were clearly visible. It seems that this is the end. After a while, Dustless felt that the throbbing of the Rinnegan in his left eye stopped, and he was relieved. At the same time, he could feel that there was a new ninjutsu in the Rinnegan. This is the complete Rinnegan Sharingan. Suddenly, Dustless smiled coldly as he felt the superpower of the Rinnegan Sharingan. The ninjutsu that was born in his eyes was similar to Uchiha Madara's. Chapter 144. Hashirama stared blankly at the Rinnegan in Dustless's eyes. He opened his mouth but swallowed his words. The mysterious black lines were inlaid with 9 dark tomo, giving people a feeling of mystery. What a powerful eye power! Dustless, who was intoxicated by the Rinnegan's eye power, suddenly opened his eyes. He raised his hand, and a black sphere flew out, directly destroying Hashirama's Edo Tensei. Hashirama, who was already under the control of the yin-yang release, was now a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. He couldn't resist Dustless at all. Looking leisurely, Kyuubi's neck was still bound by the chains from the Gedomazo's mouth. However, the only difference was that Kyuubi's body was missing a lot of chakra. It seems that the yang attribute chakra is gone. The Rinnegan and Tensegan turned into normal human eyes. Dustless's eyes suddenly narrowed, and he noticed that Kyuubi's chakra was sharply reduced. After carefully sensing it, Dustless found that Kyuubi's yang attribute chakra was gone, as if it was taken away by someone. Bastard! Damn Namikaze's Minato, bastard! The masked man, Uchiha Obito, looked at Minato with a pale face. His eyes were bloodshot, and his scarlet eyes were even more terrifying. Looking at Obito's gaze, he saw Minato with sweat on his face. A huge shadow appeared behind Minato, with sharp teeth and a white coat. Its body was shriveled, and its face was ferocious. Its dense white hair hung down to its waist, and it had a sharp dagger in its mouth. Obito was so depressed that he almost vomited blood. Just now, Minato took advantage of his battle with Sandaime and Sandaime to use Shiki Fujin to seal the Kyuubi's chakra into the body of the little devil. That is in the body of Minato's newborn son. Even if I die, I won't let you have your way. His dark blue eyes stared at the Kyuubi with only half of the chakra left. Minato's face was filled with determination. The target of the 2 masked men was undoubtedly the Kyuubi. He had sealed the yang chakra in his son's body, and sealed the yin chakra in his own body to bring to hell. You won't let us succeed, even if you die. That's ridiculous, Minato. Do you think your death will change anything in the face of such a situation? A frivolous and disdainful voice sounded, accompanied by a strong golden beam, like a rainbow cutting through the night sky, whistling straight towards Minato, penetrating his body. It was Dustless, who was wearing a mask. His deep black eyes looked at the Shinigami behind Minato. His eyes were slightly raised, and the corner of his mouth curled into a mocking smile. The beam of light that shot directly shattered his heart. This guy is here. It means that Big Brother is... Seeing Dustless appear, the second Hokage stopped his siege on Obito, and his eyes subconsciously swept towards the place where Dustless and Hashirama fought before. Big Brother's chakra disappeared. Looking back at Dustless cautiously, Tobirama cautiously said, "The disappearance of Hashirama's chakra meant self-evident. Even if it was the immortal body of the Edo Tensei, it has been completely obliterated." Minato's heart was still smoking, and the sharp-eyed people could see that there was a thumb-sized hole in the center of his heart, penetrating his body. "Minato! Yondaime!" The third Hokage and Tobirama exclaimed at the same time. The heart was penetrated, and death was inevitable. It meant that the life of the youngest and most responsible Hokage in the history of Minato was coming to an end. Dustless, the culprit, was indeed indifferent. He ignored the third Hokage's gaze and swept to Obito's side. The Kyuubi's yang chakra has been taken away, and only the yin chakra is left. Obito saw Dustless coming to his side and said with a heavy voice, his face full of killing intent, "It doesn't matter. Even if half of the chakra is missing, it's not a big deal." Dustless still remembered that in the Fourth Shinobi World War, half of the Kyuubi's chakra was missing when he resurrected the Jubi, but it didn't have much effect. The Jubi was resurrected, and there was nothing wrong with it. Kaguya was the same, and there was no difference. Go to hell, Minato! With a ferocious smile, Obito suddenly appeared in front of Minato, and his sharp dagger rushed straight towards his heart. Pucci! The thumb-sized wound on Minato's heart suddenly enlarged and turned into a fist-sized bloody hole. The Shinigami behind Minato also disappeared, and his breath of life completely disappeared. He closed his eyes in despair. Do you want to take that kid away? The other half of the QB is in his body. Obito looked at the sleeping baby with shining eyes, and he couldn't help but have an idea. As for Sandaime and Tobirama, they were just fish on the chopping board, and they didn't have the strength to stop them. No, it's useless to gather the QB now. The other Bijou are scattered all over the world. The Eye of the Moon plan is a gradual process, and there's no need to rush. Dustless said, and at the same time, he controlled the Geto Mazo and easily pulled the QB into the mouth of the Geto Mazo and completely sealed it. Dustless raised his eyes and looked deeply at the future Uzumaki Naruto. He shook his head slightly, and his body lost its texture, as if it merged into the void and disappeared. The same happened to Obito and the Geto Mazo. No matter what the future is, as the reincarnation of Ajura, Uzumaki Naruto was destined to have an extraordinary life. Only the devastated Konoha ninja village and the Sandaime and Nidaime were left behind. They could only watch Dustless and Obito leave so casually, and they had no power to stop them. Even Uchiha Obito, whose strength is far inferior to Wuchin, is also very difficult to deal with. Facing Kemui's space ability, both of them could only look at it and sigh. Chapter 145. In the Rain Village, the rain was hazy, the sky was hazy, and it was always so dark. The people passing through the streets were also like walking corpses, listless and hunched, as if they were possessed, like demons in human skin. Time flew by like a white steed. Unknowingly, a few years had passed. During this period, a lot of major events happened. The 4 major ninja villages of the 5 major countries were all unlucky. They were attacked by Dustless. Not to mention the fact that corpses were everywhere. They were even attacked by many small countries. However, a major country is a major country, and those small countries that took advantage of the situation were quickly razed to the ground. Several years have passed, and the 4 great ninja villages quickly came out of the initial haze, especially Konoha village of the Land of Fire. Konoha, with its superior geographical location, large population, and rich resources, was the first to recover and maintain its position as the largest ninja village. Of the 5 villages, only the Mist was spared, and it should have firmly occupied the throne of the strongest village. After all, the Mist was the one that was not attacked, but in reality, it was not the case. The fate of the Mist was actually more miserable. Rin's death was undoubtedly a blow to Obito. Although all the ninjas were killed, except for Dustless, Obito couldn't completely let it go, because Rin's death was indirectly related to the Mist. If the Mist didn't inject the Sanbai into Rin's body, this tragedy wouldn't have happened. Therefore, after Wuchin and Obito attacked Konoha, Uchiha Obito lurked in the Mist Village and used his powerful Sharingan to control the 4th Hokage, Yagura, and started a bloody massacre. Many ninjas with Kekkai Genkai were killed by Obito's Yagura. Some time ago, Uchiha Obito bewitched Gonpei Kisame and tricked him into joining the Akatsuki. What's the situation in Konoha? In the brightly lit secret room, Dustless quietly looked at the world in the rain, and after a moment of silence, he couldn't help but ask. His tone was very different from the past, and it had a little bit of magnetism. After a few years of living like a prince, Wuchin no longer had that awe-inspiring and sharp aura from before. His aura was completely restrained, and there was a little more gentleness. Dustless was nearly 20 years old, and compared to his ignorant self, he was now a lot more mature. Since Dustless-sama attacked Konoha a few years ago, there was no suitable person to be the Hokage, and the 3rd had to come back and continue to be the Hokage. Recalling the situation of Konoha in recent years, White Zetsu reported seriously, and after that, he silently looked at Dustless's back. In recent years, Dustless has hardly taken a step out of the Rain Village and has been cultivating in the Mist Village, so there was no way to know what he was doing. Hearing this, Dustless nodded, and his expression was the same as usual. After several years of silence, he was accustomed to not showing his emotions, and after a moment of thinking, he asked, "What's the situation of the Uchiha clan? They should be having a very difficult time now." Indeed, Black Zetsu nodded slightly. The situation of the Uchiha clan was indeed not optimistic, and even the third Hokage, who was known as a good person, didn't care about the Uchiha clan. After all, Obito and Dustless, who destroyed Konoha, were both members of the Uchiha clan. Even if they had nothing to do with the Uchiha clan, in the end, they were still members of the Uchiha clan, and it was inevitable that Konoha's higher-ups would feel estranged and disgusted with the Uchiha clan. This is especially true for Shimura Danzo, who is always clamoring to destroy the Uchiha clan to avenge himself and wash away his humiliation. However, according to Dust's guess, this old guy is probably confused by his powerful dojutsu, so he wants to obtain the Sharingan by any means necessary. What a tragic clan. Shaking his head and sighing softly, Dustless didn't feel guilty. Anyway, the Uchiha and Konoha's higher-ups didn't like each other, especially Dustless, who knew Fugaku very well. He was the kind of person who was ambitious, and it was impossible for him to give up resistance and watch the Uchiha clan being mercilessly slaughtered. Has Obito been in contact with Itachi recently? Zetsu? After a moment of silence, Dustless asked again. If he guessed correctly, Obito has been in contact with Uchiha Itachi, hoping that Itachi would join the Akatsuki. Yes, Dustless-sama, but Itachi didn't seem to be in a hurry to agree. White Zetsu nodded first, and then said in confusion, "Leave it to Obito." Dustless shook his head, and then his body disappeared strangely, as if he had drilled into the void. There was no breath, and it was impossible to capture him. And a voice sounded as if it came from the space and time, and the tone and voice sounded like Dustless. "Have you found the trace of the Ichibi? Don't tell me he's really dead." "The Ichibi is not dead. He's alive, and he's still in the Sand Village," Black Zetsu said with a hoarse voice. In these years, the only thing that Dustless cared about was the trace of the Ichibi, and fortunately, the Ichibi was still alive. That's good. The voice in the void was relieved. Dustless was really afraid that the Ichibi was really dead, and then the situation would become very complicated, and even the Eye of the Moon plan would have to be aborted. After so many years, Dustless-sama's strength has become more and more unpredictable. After a while, White Zetsu, who recovered, sighed. Dustless was so mysterious these years. He came and went without a trace. Unless Dustless specifically came to find you, there was no way to know where Dustless was. Indeed. Black Zetsu nodded, and it was undeniable that Dustless's strength has reached an incredible level. Deep in the ground, you couldn't see your 5 fingers. You could only see clearly a dozens of meters tall giant. The skin of the whole body was completely dry, like dead wood. The thick and ferocious muscles exposed the skin, and there were 9 huge eyes. Obviously, it was the Geto Mazo. A few years. It should be enough. Staring at the giant figure in front of him, Dustless walked, and even his breathing was a little rapid. Obviously, his heart was extremely uneasy. Chapter 146. Staring at the hideous and decaying body of the Geto Mazo, Dustless couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Who would have thought that such a withered tree, which was already dead, contained a majestic vitality, even more than the vitality contained in Senju Hashirama's Mokuton? When things reach an extreme, they will move in the opposite direction. It's really true. Glancing at the Geto Mazo casually, Dustless said in an indifferent tone, his dark pupils always remain calm. After so many years, Dustless has developed an unchanging attitude in the face of anything. Yes, Who would have thought that such a monster would be the shell of the Juby? The silver-haired beauty appeared, and her dark watery eyes stopped on Dustless's body and immediately moved over. Her calm eyes rippled. Who else could it be but Otsutsuki Hagoromo? Otsutsuki Haruo's slender silver hair rippled with an elegant fragrance. She wore light makeup and a plain dress. Her skin was smooth and fair, and she was still as coquettish and charming as before. Her smile and frown could turn the world upside down. Her breath smelled like orchids, and her thin pink lips were particularly attractive. Her eyes were narrowed into crescents, and there were charming and lovely dimples on her delicate face. She looked at Wuchen with a smile, and she was particularly lovely and charming. Dustless's face changed slightly. He looked at Otsutsuki Hagoromo speechlessly, and then looked at the latter staring at him with a teasing face. He took back the words that were about to come out of his mouth, closed his eyes, and ignored her directly. There was no need to look for trouble. Lecherous, but not daring scum. Seeing Dustless closing his eyes and ignoring her, Otsutsuki Hagoromo's expression suddenly stiffened. She no longer had the coquettish posture before. She gritted her teeth and stared at Dustless, stomped her feet, and couldn't wait to kick him. "Are you talking about me?" Dustless looked at Otsutsuki Hagoromo with an innocent face, and he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Obviously, they have been married for a long time, and I don't know how many times I have done it with you. How dare you say that I am lecherous but not daring? Is there anyone else here besides you? Otsutsuki Haguro looked at Dustless contemptuously with a sneer on his face. He was very disdainful of Dustless playing dumb. The corner of his mouth twitched fiercely. Dustless suppressed the impulse to hit her in his heart and finally shook his head. It was impossible to reason with women, and there was no need to reason. Dustless, who knew Otsutsuki Haruo's temperament well, thought so. Looking at Otsutsuki Haruo's graceful figure, Dustless calmly retracted his gaze and was too lazy to talk nonsense. What he had to do was to teach her a lesson at night and make her speechless. It's time. Soon, the Uchiha clan will be destroyed. Dustless stared at the black coffin in front of him and felt the coldness that filled it. He chuckled softly. This fellow is most suitable to be my clone in the future. Gotcha! As soon as Wu Chen's voice fell, the ice-cold coffin cracked open with a bang, revealing a rather young figure. The corpse stood up as if it had come back to life. The corpse was extremely well preserved, and there was no sign of damage at all. His facial features were clearly visible, and he was quite handsome. He was wearing a simple black coat, and the Uchiha round fan behind him was clearly visible. The only difference was that there were countless black iron rods inserted all over the body. He will be my clone in the future. Dustless smiled slightly, and the corpse in front of him opened his eyes, revealing scarlet eyes. It was the 3-Tomo Sharingan. Who is this guy? And his eye power doesn't seem to be weak. Otsutsuki Haruo looked at the corpse standing up, and her eyes flashed with surprise. She could feel that the corpse in front of her was extraordinary, especially the eye power of the Sharingan. He is Uchiha Kagami, and he has the Manjikyu Sharingan. His thoughts poured into Uchiha Kagami's mind, and under Otsutsuki Haruo's surprised gaze, Uchiha Kagami's 3-Tomo Sharingan suddenly connected. That pair of eyes is really a waste. Otsutsuki Haruo said with regret. It's a pity to put the Manjikyu Sharingan on a dead person, especially when Dustless is controlling Uchiha Kagami. Even if he has the Manjikyu Sharingan, it won't work. There's no way. Hearing this, Dustless shrugged. Uchiha Kagami's descendant, Uchiha Shursui, should also have a Manjikyu Sharingan now, but if he can pledge his allegiance to him, Dustless can give him Uchiha Kagami's eyes, but this is obviously impossible. Uchiha Kagami will appear in the Akatsuki as my clone in the future, so it's better if I don't show up. The reason why Dustless has such an idea is also after careful consideration. One masked man is enough. He only needs to guide Uchiha Bido behind the scenes to implement the plan, and there is no need to appear in person. 2 masked men may be able to fish in troubled waters in a short time, But as time passes, some clever people will find flaws in it, and by then, there will be many flaws. For example, Uchiha Itachi, not to mention his strength, he is extremely shrewd and extremely sensitive, so it's only a matter of time before he finds flaws. Indeed, Otsutsuki Haruo also felt that Dustless should live in seclusion and shouldn't do everything by himself. Rebuilding the Otsutsuki clan with Dustless is the first important task, especially since there is no movement in his stomach, which makes Otsutsuki Haruo particularly irritable, and all day long he hopes that Dustless will communicate with her more. However, Dustless naturally didn't understand Otsutsuki Haruo's thoughts. He just focused on controlling Uchiha Kagami's body, frowning slightly as he looked at the black conduits all over the body. "Your technique is really clumsy, Dustless." Dustless looked at the black iron conduits all over Uchiha Kagami's body with disdain. These conduits are the foundation of controlling Uchiha Kagami's body. This is really not beautiful. Looking at the disorderly black iron conduits inserted all over the body, Dustless smiled awkwardly and immediately controlled Uchiha Kagami's body to absorb the black iron conduits. Chapter 147. Uchiha Kagami's body was like a black hole in the depths of the universe, instantly swallowing all the Tetsu in his body. Surprisingly, Uchiha Kagami's Scarlet Mangekyo Sharingan flashed a little human-like light, and his cold skin slowly rose in temperature, showing a little warmth. However, what was even more incredible was that Uchiha Kagami was breathing. Otsutsuki Hagura looked at the scene in front of her with surprise, and the shock in her beautiful eyes couldn't be concealed. Uchiha Kagami didn't look dead at all. He looked like a vegetable who had lost his will. There's no need to be surprised. Even if it's resurrecting him, it won't be difficult. Dustless chuckled. This was just a simple use of the yin-yang release. And if Dustless wanted to, he could directly use the Rinnegan's forbidden jutsu Geto, Rinnegan, to resurrect Uchiha Kagami. So this was just a trivial matter for Dustless. This appearance should be fine, right? Uchiha Kagami's voice was full of vitality, and he didn't look like a dead body at all. He was obviously an unusually strong young man, full of vitality and sunshine. Ever since Uzumaki Nagato created the 6 Paths of Pain, he used the powerful eye power of the Rinnegan to successfully kill the former leader of the Rain Village, Hanzo the Salamander, who was known as the demigod. Since then, he began to occupy the Rain Village in the name of God. The orange young man looked down at the misty scenery outside the window. His purple pupils were emotionless, and the mysterious black lines that surged out of his body were deathly still. This person was cold and emotionless, wearing a black robe embroidered with dark red clouds, and the wind and waves from afar would avoid this young man. It was Yahiko Tendo. "Conan, have you investigated the origin of the 2 masked men?" Yahiko asked indifferently without turning his head. His tone had no human emotion, just like the black iron rods embedded in his body, like a machine. "I'm sorry, Nagato. I'm afraid I'll disappoint you again." Hearing this, Conan smiled bitterly. The 2 masked men were naturally Dustless and Obito, but both of them were mysterious existences who came and went without a trace. Not to mention investigating their origin, it was difficult to even find their traces. In the past few years, Conan has been secretly investigating Dustless and Obito, especially Dustless. She felt that she had seen Dustless in the past, and every time she saw Dustless, she had a sense of déjà vu. Sure, those 2 guys are the most troublesome existences. Although he had already expected Conan's answer, Daohiko Tion couldn't help but frown slightly. Whether it was Wuchin or Obito, both of them seemed to have fallen from the sky without leaving any trace. This kind of person was the most difficult to deal with. "There," Conan thought. Conan pondered. Conan replied, after pondering for a while. Although she didn't know the specific purpose of Wuchin and Obito, at least they were allies now. "Well, let's not worry about them for the time being." Yahiko nodded. As Conan said before, whether it was Dustless or Obito, at least they were now in the same boat. After a while, The atmosphere suddenly became silent. Both Conan and Yahiko were silent. What a rare scene. The space beside Yahiko suddenly distorted, like a spring in the deep sea, and soon, a mysterious man wearing a mask and black clothes came out of it. Wearing an orange spiral mask and a thin body, it was Uchiha Bito. Don't tell me you don't even know how to deal with people. Conan's pretty face turned ugly when she saw Bito's sudden intrusion. The cold light in her eyes disappeared in a flash, and a sullen expression appeared on her face. Her delicate face was filled with coldness, like a blooming snow lotus. Obviously, she didn't like Abito very much. "Oh, you're really unreasonable. We're allies now. But when that guy appeared, you didn't like him so much, Conan." Ignoring Conan's angry face, Uchiha Abito said bluntly, and the guy he was talking about was naturally Wuchen. "You?" Conan was startled. Her pretty face was very unnatural. She looked at Abito angrily and said coldly, "He's different from you, a walking corpse." "I'm afraid you can't convince yourself with these words." Abito smiled faintly. Then he looked back at Pain, who was still expressionless, and walked straight towards him. Did Uchiha Itachi agree? Without looking at Abito, Yahiko's voice was always so cold, isolated from the world, as if it came from a different space, incompatible with the world in front of him. "Not for the time being. I still need a fire." Abito was obviously used to Yahiko's tone, so he just replied faintly. Obviously, his plan to kidnap Itachi was blocked. In that case, after a moment of silence, Pain's eyes flashed with a cold light, and his whole body was filled with killing intent. "Then punish him in the name of God. A mere chess piece dares to call himself a god. Ridiculous." Under the mask, Abito raised the corner of his mouth and immediately said indifferently, "That's not necessary. Just let nature take its course. I believe that Konoha's higher-ups will soon make a move on the Uchiha." Little did they know that the content of the conversation between Uchiha Abito and Tendo Yahiko fell into the ears of dust in the distance. "Let nature take its course. Ridiculous. I only believe in changing fate." "Then let me design a script for you in advance. My stupid brother Uchiha Itachi." Chapter 148. A black shadow shuttled through the dense forest at an extremely fast speed, and it was impossible to capture its movement trajectory. Its speed was completely beyond the range of human vision. "That kid hasn't opened his Manjikyu Sharingan yet." The figure shuttling through the dense forest was Uchiha Kagami, and his speed was extremely fast. As the controller, Dustless was naturally still far away in the Rain Village, using his powerful eyes to control Kagami's movements. "I didn't expect that kid Itachi hasn't opened his Manjikyu Sharingan." In other words, Uchiha Shursui is still alive. Dustless, who was far away in the Rain Village, was thinking calmly. Suddenly, a bright light flashed in his heart, and his eyes suddenly opened, flashing with a burning light. After thinking for a while, a huge plan suddenly took shape in his heart. "In that case, let me help you open your Manjikyu Sharingan." Dustless's mouth curled into a cold smile. The way to open his Manjikyu Sharingan is extremely simple and straightforward. As long as Itachi sees his loved ones die in front of him, he will open his Manjikyu Sharingan. Now, Itachi has 3 Tomo Sharingan. In other words, as long as his loved ones die in front of him, he will open his Manjikyu Sharingan. "Konoha, it's been a long time." The huge village in front of him came into view, and Dustless smiled through Kagami's vision. He had decided that Konoha's ninjas were the most resilient. In just a few years, Konoha came back from the dead and was even more prosperous and powerful than before. However, perhaps because of the previous sneak attack by Wuchen and Abito, Konoha was particularly vigilant about the surrounding environment. There were 3 layers inside and 3 layers outside. The layers of security were very strict, and there were many large defensive enchantments. However, these barriers were a simple matter for Dustless, and he easily invaded the interior of Konoha and rushed to the Uchiha's base at full speed. A large number of clansmen gathered at the Naka Shrine of the Uchiha clan. Many members of the Uchiha clan looked cautious and nervous. Most of the people here were the elite ninjas of the Uchiha clan. Naturally, they were on the side of the Uchiha clan. Of course, there were some special existences among them. The young man, who looked quite similar to Uchiha Kagami, intentionally or unintentionally glanced at Fugaku, who was sitting on the main seat. Sometimes, he looked around at the angry members of the Uchiha clan, and his shining eyes dimmed. These fools only think about fighting for power and profit all day long. The young man was Uchiha Shursui. Due to the fact that Dustless had taught Shursui before, he also made a lot of contributions during the 3rd Shinobi World Conference. That's how he got the title Instant Body Shursui. To some extent, it was Dustless who created Shursui. Of course, it also had a lot to do with his own sweat and effort. Shursui sighed in his heart, cursing these people for being blinded. Even if the Uchiha clan really repels the higher-ups of Konoha and gets the position of Hokage, will the noble clans in the village support Madara? There's no need to think about it. Obviously they won't. It seems that I can only use that jutsu to change his mind. Staring at Fugaku on the main seat, Shursui suddenly made a decision in his heart. He planned to use the strongest genjutsu in his Mangekyo, Kodoeme Tsukumi, to tamper with Fugaku's thoughts. Only in this way can he stop the Uchiha from going berserk. Everyone. At this time, Uchiha Fugaku opened his eyes and waved his hand with great momentum, and the noise in the hall immediately stopped. The higher-ups of Konoha have completely torn their faces. We can only resist. If we don't resist, we will be directly slaughtered. A few years ago, the Kyuubi attacked us, and Sarutobi has already poured dirty water on our heads. Uchiha Fugaku's voice was full of reason, and his speech was full of exaggeration. At the same time, he didn't forget to look at the emotional changes of the people around him from the corner of his eyes. Seeing that everyone was angry and had a common enemy, Fugaku couldn't help but laugh proudly. And then he raised his arms and shouted, "The only way out for the Uchiha is to resist and take over the position of Hokage. Then the entire village will belong to the Uchiha clan." Fugaku Shursui. Hearing this, many Uchiha ninjas praised Fugaku for his great wisdom, and some of them even put Fugaku in the same position as Madara. Fugaku was worthy of being an old fox. He was very smart to incite the sympathy of these people. In the face of the rich resources of Konoha, no one was not tempted. Sure enough, Fugaku Uchiha is an ambitious man. It seems that only by using Kodoeme Tsukumi will I be able to change your mind and make you completely loyal to the village. Uchiha Shursui clenched his fists and made a decision. When the meeting is dissolved, he will use Kodoeme Tsukumi on Uchiha Fugaku to change his mind. How can I let you succeed? Shursui's mouth curled into a cold smile, and his eyes shot a cold light directly towards Fugaku. If Fugaku's mind is really changed by this kid, although the Uchiha clan will not be able to avoid the destruction of Konoha, maybe something unexpected will happen. With the passage of time, the Uchiha clan meeting ended quickly. It can be said that it was perfect. Most people agreed with Fugaku's point of view and chose to seize the position of Hokage through conspiracy. To make it clear, it was a coup d'etat. Inside the Naka shrine, the crowd quickly dispersed. Fugaku also turned around and left with his guards. Naturally, Shursui also secretly followed him. This kid naturally wanted to find a secluded place where he could release Kodoeme Tsukumi on Fugaku. Seeing this scene, the people in the Rain Village suddenly sneered, and their pupils suddenly burst out with horror. Shursui, who was controlled by Dustless, suddenly burst out with strong, killing intent. His Sharingan also changed, suddenly turning into a purple Rinnegan. Chapter 149. There is no doubt that Uchiha Shursui is a righteous person. His vision and heart are beyond the narrow clan doctrine, which is rare in the world of shinobi. This is very similar to his father, Uchiha Kagami. In the depths of the dark forest, Dustless controlled Kagami to flash like a ghost, shuttling through the dense forest, controlling the weight of his body to an unparalleled degree. Even if his body fell on a branch as thin as a willow branch, he could jump up and quickly chase after the two figures in front of him. Uchiha Sure. The kid from back then can already stand on his own. Dustless suddenly remembered when he was still in Konoha. At that time, Uchiha Sure was just a little kid. Now, after a few years, not only has he successfully awakened the Manjiki Sharingan, but his strength is also quite good. This really made Dustless sigh at the impermanence of the world. But those who stop me will die. Dustless's mouth was cold, and his whole body was overflowing with cold air. If Shursui really uses Kodoame Tsukumi to change Fugaku's mind, then the whole plan will be completely destroyed. His speed is quite good, worthy of the body flicker Shursui. Seeing Shursui's speed as fast as lightning, almost instantly catching up with Fugaku, Dustless smiled slightly. He taught Shursui a lot about the body flicker technique. Shursui, looking at Uchiha Shursui, who suddenly appeared in front of him, Fugaku frowned slightly. Then he relaxed and showed a kind smile as he said with a light chuckle, "I was wondering who it was. What's the matter?" Uchiha Fugaku smiled calmly, giving the feeling of a cool breeze, without the slightest hint of schemer, which made Shursui hesitate for a while. Fugaku has always been good to him, even better than his son, Itachi. If he mercilessly uses Kodoame Tsukumi to change Fugaku's mind, then he really can't do it. Patriarch, please take back your order. The Uchiha should coexist peacefully with Konoha. Clenching his teeth, the hesitation in Shursui's eyes was replaced by determination as he looked at Fugaku and said firmly, "The Uchiha clan is digging its own grave." Shursui's cold and indifferent voice undoubtedly showed his position. Hearing this, the gentle smile on Fugaku's face suddenly stiffened, and he looked at Shursui with uncertainty. This kid has the Manjiki Sharingan and can be said to be the current combat power of the Uchiha clan. If Fugaku is not optimistic about the future of the Uchiha clan, then maybe the Uchiha clan will be completely destroyed. Foolish Shursui. Fugaku scolded coldly. Since the incident a few years ago, the higher-ups of Konoha have been treating us coldly, and they can't wait to get rid of us as soon as possible. Haven't you seen the situation of the Uchiha clan over the years? Fugaku sneered. Also, even if I really give up this plan, do you think that the higher-ups of Konoha will let the Uchiha clan go? I'm sorry to tell you that this is impossible. Although Fugaku's words were a bit fierce, what he said was indeed an undeniable fact. Even if the Uchiha clan is really sincere in serving Konoha, with the existence of a character like Shimura Danzo, the Uchiha clan won't be safe and sound. Patriarch, you only need to answer my question, whether you will give up this rebellion or not, and I will naturally solve other problems. Shursui looked at Fugaku with a blank expression, and the Sharingan in his eyes was spinning rapidly. As long as Fugaku refuses his proposal, Shursui will not hesitate to use Kodoame Tsukumi to change Fugaku's mind. I'm sorry, but I won't accept your conditions even if I'm torn to pieces. As long as we resist Konoha, it will be a shortcut for the Uchiha clan. Fugaku's eyes were filled with wisdom, and at the same time, his three-tomo Sharingan began to spin. He knew that the next battle would be hard. Several guards also surrounded Fugaku and stared at Shursui. Shursui's instant body flicker is not a joke, and perhaps in just a moment, their heads will fall to the ground. In that case, under the horrified gaze of Fugaku and the others, Shursui's Mangekyo flashed and stared at Fugaku's sluggish eyes, and the Mangekyo emitted a strong fluctuation of eye power. Kodoame Tsukumi. Not good. Feeling the horrifying eye power of Shursui, Fugaku's face changed dramatically, and his whole body became cold, and a huge spiritual force invaded his mind, causing him to faint instantly. Boom! However, at this moment, a strange black figure shuttled, and it was extremely fast, and it easily kicked Obito, and the huge force kicked Shursui dozens of feet away. One step too late. Looking at Fugaku on the ground, Kagami frowned. and Dustless's face became gloomy. For the sake of our old friendship, I wanted to let you go, but it seems that I have to take your eyes to change Fugaku's will. Thinking of this, Dustless controlled Kagami's eyes to jump with a cold light, and the only way to change Fugaku's will is to use Kotoemit's Tsukumi or Izanami. However, the price of using Izanami is too great, and it's definitely not something Dustless can afford. Although Dustless can control Kagami's eyes, as long as he takes Shirsue's eyes, he can change Fugaku's will again. Who the hell are you? Shirsue's face was ugly as he looked at the man in black with a very familiar feeling. Hearing this, the corner of Dustless's mouth curled into a playful smile. Then he turned his head, revealing half of his face, looking at Shirsue with a cold expression. My stupid son, don't you even recognize your own father? Chapter 150. Shirsue looked sluggishly at the face that was similar to his own. It was undoubtedly his father, Uchiha Kagami. However, after a moment of shock, Shirsue quickly recovered. His father entered the kingdom of heaven many years ago. It's not father. That is to say, Shirsue's face suddenly turned pale, and an endless cold aura floated from his body. Even the air around him was completely frozen and shattered. Since it's a puppet, but a puppet that can breathe, it's really rare. Shirsue's Manjikyu Sharingan stared at the smiling Uchiha Kagami, and his face was full of disbelief. The puppet in front of him was too lifelike, and no one would believe it if he said that it was a normal human being. It's just a puppet, but not only does it have the ability to breathe, especially the bright eyes of Uchiha Kagami, which has the effect of passing off as the real thing. I'm afraid that people who don't know whether Uchiha Kagami is dead or alive will think that the person in front of them is alive. You dare to desecrate my father's body. I will kill you. The scarlet-red Manjikyu Sharingan glared at Uchiha Kagami, and he glared at Dustless, who was controlling Kagami, and his killing intent was constantly bursting out of his body. Obviously, Kagami was completely out of control. You think you can kill me? Kagami sneered at Shirsue, and he was thinking about which eye he should take, and it didn't matter whether Shirsue agreed or not. Body flicker technique. Whoosh! In just a short time, Shirsue appeared behind Kagami, and the sharp katana reflected an extremely cold light as it swept towards Kagami. Your speed is good, but it's still a bit slow. Suddenly, a golden light flashed from his body, and the dazzling golden luster dotted around his body, turning into a strong and thick rib that easily blocked the fatal blow. Is this Kinsusunu? Shirsue's eyes narrowed slightly, and he instantly burst a distance away and stared at Kagami's dark eyes and immediately felt the golden light of the evil chakra, and his heart couldn't help but sink. To be able to release Susanoo with ordinary eyes, who is the one controlling father behind the scenes. Shirsue looked at Kagami's dark eyes with a heavy expression, and his heart fell to the bottom, and he couldn't help but wonder who was controlling Kagami behind the scenes. Kinsusunu is a ninjutsu that can't be used casually, and there are many restrictions, and the person behind it can control the puppet to use Kinsusunu at will. It can be seen that he also has the same Manjikyu Sharingan, and obviously his eye's power has reached an unfathomable level. Do you want to hand me your eyes, Kagami? Shirsue's Shirsue, and Shishizui, and the golden sword in his hand, and the golden sword in his hand, and golden sword in his. Well, don't underestimate me, and you're not the only one who can use that technique. Kinsusunu. Green chakra overflowed from Kagami's body, and strong ribs impressively formed, and a strong defense suddenly formed, and the afterglow spread out and wrapped around Shirsue, looking extremely strong. Puchi! The golden light directly penetrated the absolute defense that seemed like an iron tower, and Shirsue's body started to bleed. How is this possible? Looking at the blood on his abdomen, Shirsue's face was particularly shocked, and although he instinctively dodged, he was still injured by the sword. How is this possible? Hearing this, Shirsue's dark eyes flashed with contempt, and he said, "In the face of absolute power, Any ninjutsu in the world is futile. Kinsusanu's strength is beyond doubt, but it also varies from person to person. If the opponent is a strength-type player like Hashirama, then no matter how strong Kinsusanu is, he can only look at the dust. However, if the opponent is someone like the Five Kages, then it's godlike ninjutsu for them. Deceiving the masses with your lies. Looking coldly at Shursui sneered, and the green chakra erupted again, and the ribs that were broken by Dustless were repaired. More majestic chakra wrapped around the thick bones, and after a few breaths of time, the giant chakra was exposed to the air. It was a mature Kinsusanu of Uchiha Shursui. The green giant was wrapped in an extremely cold aura, and it looked ferocious. It held a drill-like weapon in its huge hand, and the sharp tip made people tremble unconsciously. Too small. Seeing this, Uchiha Kagami shook his head, or, to put it simply, Dustless, who was controlling Uchiha Kagami, didn't care about it at all. The gap between the mature form and the ultimate form of Susanoo is completely dimensional. It seems that you can't hand over your eyes. So, I can only take them myself. Dustless's eyes suddenly shot out a cold light, and the pupils of Dustless in the Rain Village instantly distorted rapidly, and unprecedented fluctuations of eye power shot out from his eyes. Shursui's pupils changed naturally, and the deep black eyes turned into purple Rinnegan. The mysterious black lines spread out like water ripples, and there were 9 clear dark black tomo hanging on it, which was particularly attractive. That's Kinsusanu's Shursui looked at Shursui's right eye sluggishly. He never heard that his father had this mysterious black tomo hanging on his eyes. Don't be so surprised. I'll let you feel the ultimate power of the Rinnegan. Kagami looked at Shursui inside the Susanoo with a sinister smile. His eyes were fixed on the Susanoo, and a cold smile appeared on his face. Mahabharata. Chapter 151. Mahaharoya. Kagami's left eye suddenly stared at Shursui inside Kinsusanoo, and the Sharingan in his left eye rippled, and the 9 tomo hanging on the black lines trembled slightly. What kind of jutsu is this? Uchiha Shursui, who was an immature Susanoo, looked at Uchiha Kagami as if he was facing a great enemy. Especially when he saw the purple eyes with the 9 tomo, he had a bad feeling in his heart that he had never felt before. It was like being stared at by a prehistoric beast. It's definitely not an ordinary jutsu. It must be boom, boom. Shursui's voice inside the Susanoo hasn't fallen yet, when a strong repulsive force came head-on, and an unprecedented heavy blow directly swallowed the Susanoo. The seemingly mighty Kinsusanoo was instantly torn apart. Puff! Blood splashed in midair, and looking up, it was Shursui who was hit by the repulsive force. His whole body was covered in blood, and his clothes were all stained with blood. He didn't seem to have the strength to fight anymore, but some people can't be judged by common sense. Even so, Shursui still struggled to stand up. Are your eyes the legendary Rinnegan? Looking at Kagami's left eye, Shursui's eyes were filled with understanding. A long time ago, there were legends of the 3 great dojutsu in the ninja world. Yes, you know the Rinnegan through ninjutsu. Although the legend of the Rinnegan has been passed down since ancient times, but in the end, there are very few people who really understand it, and the difference between Dustless's Rinnegan and the ordinary Rinnegan is quite big. It's true. It's easy to recognize. Hearing this, Shursui's mouth raised a bitter smile and said in despair, "Such an eye can't be the Byakugan, and naturally it can't be the Sharingan. Although there's a big difference between your eyes and the legendary Rinnegan, it still retains the shape of the Rinnegan to a large extent." That's true. Kagami nodded. Although Uchiha Shursui's statement was just an inference, it was true. If the 9 tomo were removed from the eyes, there wouldn't be much difference between the eyes and the Rinnegan. A character like you shouldn't be interested in Uchiha. I don't think he has any relationship with you. Shursui pointed at Fugaku, who had fainted, and said to Dustless with a rosy complexion on his face, "Mahaharoya's frontal attack, and you can still hold on until now, not bad." Kagami nodded slightly. The essence of Maharoya is actually similar to Amaterasu. It releases a strong repulsive force at the focus of the pupil, and it can be positioned at will. In fact, it's not much different from Madara's wheel grave, border prison. However, Kagami can naturally see that Sure Sui has reached the end of his life. You can't say that. He's an important part of my script. Kagami replied with a faint smile, and then looked at Sure Sui with a cold expression. As long as I take your Sharingan, I can change his will again. Then it won't be long before the Uchiha clan is completely destroyed. Kagami's mouth raised into a gloomy smile. Sure Sui's previous use of Kodo Ematsukami to tamper with Fugaku's will did indeed cause him a lot of trouble. But now, as long as he takes his Sharingan, he can use Kodo Ematsukami to change Fugaku's will again. Although I don't know what your purpose is, I won't let you succeed. Sure Sui's eyes were full of determination, and his face was resolute. He loved Konoha, and he was willing to sacrifice his life to protect the Uchiha clan. A sad ant crushed by the wheel of fate, you can't change the outcome of the Uchiha clan's destruction. Looking at Uchiha Sure Sui's determined face with disdain, Mirror's face was full of sarcasm. Now, Sure Sui's body was full of gold and jade. Almost all of his internal organs were shattered by the Mahabharata, and it won't be long before he dies. I know, you want nothing more than to take my Sharingan, to reactivate Kodo Ematsukami, and change Fugaku's will again. Uchiha Sure Sui smiled faintly. He could see through this point, and immediately his face became gloomy. Then, this is the only way to protect Uchiha and the village. Pucci. Under Kagami's surprised gaze, Sure Sui didn't show the slightest mercy, and his fingers hooked, and without hesitation, he dug out his Mangekyo. Boom! Sure Sui's right hand suddenly burst, and the two soft eyeballs exploded into blood mist. Sure Sui looked at the scene in front of him in a daze. Everything happened so fast that he almost couldn't react. When he came back to his senses, Sure Sui's Mangekyo Sharingan had already turned into a bloody mist. Your personality hasn't changed, Sure Sui. After a long silence, Kagami sighed and looked at Sure Sui with a complicated expression. Looking at the shattered Mangekyo Sharingan, Kagami didn't hate Sure Sui, because this wasn't his fault, and it was this deformed era that caused his tragedy. Uchiha Sure Sui's greatness was beyond doubt. He was willing to sacrifice everything for the sake of the village, even if it was his own life. Even if Shimura Danzo took his eye, he still didn't feel any hatred or pain towards the village. Even before his death, he gave his other eye to Uchiha Itachi, hoping that he would protect the village. Sure Sui was a man of justice, but he was also a hero of tragedy. But this didn't change my plan, Sure Sui. Even without your Mangekyo Sharingan, I can still change Fugaku's will again. That you're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.